Welcome in. We're going to have a college football panel here tonight talking group of five. I love talking about these small teams. Both the guys on here with me tonight know those small teams, under the radar teams, as well as anybody. Looking forward to breaking these down and, doing kind of a deep dive. We'll try to quickly go through them because we are going to talk about a lot of conferences, a lot of teams. We'll try to go quick, but hit on a lot of things. If you guys do have any questions and you're watching live, you can put them in the chat. We'll be happy to try to get to all those questions. If you have a question on team or a process or whatever it may be, happy to try to cover that. If you're watching on Twitter or X, you can definitely jump into YouTube where you'll be able to ask the questions there as well. I know a lot of people will be watching on X. If you are, that's awesome as well. And looking forward to doing this here, a Tuesday night edition. 10 p.m. on the East Coast. I like it. Let's get into this, but first I want to welcome in the guests. First, I'll bring in Ron. Ron, I've done quite a few different shows with you. Always fantastic doing shows with you. You know your stuff extremely well. How's the summer and off season treated you?
Well, it's been a summer of work in some respects, and a summer of getting to go out of town, a lot of vacations and so on. The work is because it's so important to get ahead of the game, especially these days when we're going to talk about season overs that, some of these things, the over-unders, they don't even exist anymore. But the summer's been great. Spent a week in Vegas. Might hear it still in my voice from that time period. Connected with a lot of people. That was nice. Did not go to the Bet Bash activities there, but connected with the people that I wanted to connect with and some new ones. And also browsed around the casinos for some season wins and stuff. Now delving into the NFL. Very good summer, very relaxing summer.
Nice. And Ron, before we get any farther, let the people who are watching know, how long have you been doing this? Like, what do you consider your bread and butter? Sorry, I don't mean to. Listen,
there's that age thing again.
Ron, I'm not trying to do it. I'm just saying that Ron knows he's forgotten more things than I know. So Ron knows his stuff very well.
Yeah.
I know you do NFL a lot. You do a lot with Chris, Las Vegas Chris, fantastic handicapper as well. But give people just a little bit of a background about yourself real quick.
Yeah. So I've been doing this ever since the Ivy League was popular because that's where I honed my skill. That really was the conference that I could learn line of scrimmage data. And you were a bad in my opinion, I was a bad handicapper if I couldn't hit 3 out of 5 games because I had a predictable model that actually I took it back up into COVID, still works today. So I've been doing this for a lot of decades, really only interacting with you about 3 years ago on a different type of project where I started to think, well, maybe I should start sharing some of the stuff that I know and talking about the process, not necessarily picks, but the process is important for all the youngsters out there. And that's what I'll be talking about a lot this fall and winter with Chris and then with Ted on Thursdays. So I'm out there now and I'm willing to share some information and share some process stuff. But it's guys like you and now Duck as well, who I've just met for the first time, where this brainstorming thing is really important. Can't emphasize it enough.
Absolutely. And let's bring in Mr. Duck here. Step on a Duck. You know him from the forums. He's putting himself out there a lot more this year. I've chatted with him in the past through the DMs. The guy knows what he's doing. Looking forward to chatting with you for the first time here, doing a video together, man. First, how are you? And let us know where people can find your work, a little bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, Kyle, it's great to be here, and thanks for the intro. So I've been gambling on college football for 16 years, and it's really my favorite thing to do, and it involves a lot of work in the off season. It's about 250 days a year, but it's really great to be able to find value early in the summer and build my positions and shore up my futures and my regular season win card, and now some game of the year type stuff that's coming out, and week 0 and week 1, which is 5 days away. So real active on all the major forums, Twitter, and I'll be doing some freelance work this fall for another major gambling related content provider, Action Network Sports. And so I'll be writing some pieces for them consistently week to week. And that's where you can find my work.
Nice. Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that. And I like that you're going to be able to share more things out there to the public this year. Like Ron said, he's been able to share more here lately, and now you are as well. And let's get into talking about what we want to do here tonight. We can talk about lots of things, but we love college football. We're going to talk about college football now. Wes, thanks for being here. Fox, thanks for being here as well. And let's get into this. Let's talk American Athletic Conference. To start with, we're going to do this. We're going to talk an underrated team, one that each person finds underrated going into the season, an overrated team. And this can be either from a season win total, a future. It can be on a game-to-game basis who you think will be underrated. Any way you want to look at it. And then we'll have a team that we cover briefly, and then we'll talk about our favorite win total in the conference, or it can be a future, whatever you want it to be. But favorite season-long bet here. So let's get started in the AAC. Ron, the randomizer chose you to go first here. What do you think of the AAC? Do you have a team that you think may be undervalued in the marketplace here as we start the season out?
I've looked at some of the publications once I've done my work and charted things out, and I don't see anything that stands out absolutely crazily underrated in terms of what the prognosticators are saying, but I do think that Tom Herman at Florida Atlantic is interesting because he came in with a tremendous resume. He won at the highest levels, not to the extent that the highest levels wanted him to win, but I thought even last year that he'd sneak by with a couple wins. He was known as a pretty good underdog coach, and it didn't happen at all last year. So I'm just wondering, has he found a new level, which isn't a good level, or can he build on this? Does he know what type of player he now needs on this team to compete in this conference? It's not exactly the greatest conference of all time. We're going to find with Group of Five that the best players are leaving the programs now that there's nil money and that you can poach. So you can turn around a program, you can lose too many players, or you can gain some players, and you can change your standing within these Group of Five conferences. It's not a play for me, but I would say Florida Atlantic is intriguing from an underrated value.
Florida Atlantic, a team that I'd look to try to bet unders on throughout the course of the season. I just don't trust that offense. Can the offensive line be half decent? I mean, they were really bad last year. Their defense was actually pretty good. I do think that Herman should do a better job than this at a school like this. Like you said, it's not a conference where you would think he would be overmatched. So it could be a buy low spot. I don't know about Cam Fancher. We'll see. I left on my notes for Florida Atlantic going into the season. I said I want to watch and see. I don't want to bet anything at the beginning. Maybe play some unders. I'll say my team second here. I'm going to go with Memphis. I know Memphis is highly rated. I'm taking Memphis because I think they have a really high ceiling. I think they're the team that if the defense actually comes together, they could be really good. Because last year they have to win these massive shootouts. Hennigan's awesome. They have a really good offense. Everybody knows that. They switch up defensive coordinators. If it works out, I think Memphis is the type of team that it wouldn't shock me if they make the playoff. Now, obviously, I'm not saying they will make the playoff, but I think that they have that kind of upside. I think that they're the team that has the highest upside in this conference. They do play a really tough schedule, so they're going to have to do it on the field. I like Memphis in general. I think this is a team that, Hennigan needs to stay healthy because the depth behind him is not very good either. So if I say this and you're thinking back here in a few weeks and Hennigan's gotten hurt, forget everything I just said. It's all off the table at that point. But I do think, if they can stop the run a little bit better, not get into all these epic shootouts, I think this could be a dangerous team. So I'll go Memphis. I know they're highly rated. I think that they could just overachieve by quite a bit if things fall the right way. All right, Duck, you got an underrated team here?
I do, and it's kind of a public underrated darling from what I've read to start the offseason, but I think East Carolina is going to take a big step forward this year. I like the changes that they made at the offensive coordinator position. I think that they're going to take a big leap based on what they return. We should see a lot more continuity in the trenches from East Carolina. Their offense is going to be a lot more up tempo and fast paced. So should definitely see a lot better positioning from ECU there. But if you actually dive into the metrics last year, while the team was 2-10, defense was actually quite stout. They really held up against the run pretty decently, and I mean held SMU to only 31. They lost a low-scoring affair against Charlotte, low-scoring affair against Tulane, a close game against Navy, and while the offense was just really, really in position to not do their team any favors, the defense actually really overperformed last year, relatively speaking, when you dive into the metrics. And so I think we'll see the offense take leaps and bounds this year. And if you just if you're a power ratings guy, or if you have any sort of ratings that you lean into, I've got ECU favored 9 games this year, and I think that they could be one of those teams that you look up in the standings late in the season in the AAC, and they might be able to decide a little bit about what happens there, right? I think if you look at the slate for ECU as well, the conference slate with Charlotte, Army, Temple, FAU, who they host, at Tulsa, at North Texas, Navy. I mean, none of those games are unwinnable. And based on who they avoid in league play, they can pile up the AAC wins relatively quickly just based on the hand that they were dealt. A real big game for them will be they've got a regional rivalry game where they host App State, which will be really telling to see where that program is at. I think they'll open 2-0 with wins over Norfolk State, who's a really bad FCS bottom feeder in the MEAC, and then they're at Old Dominion. We'll get into Old Dominion later, but I think with assessing these teams as well, especially when you dive into futures or regular season wins, and with the size of these conferences where teams no longer play each other in a round robin format, you really should dive into the hand that you're dealt from a scheduling standpoint. So when you avoid Memphis and you avoid Tulane and you host UTSA and you avoid some of the other teams that are considered to be at the top of the league, such as USF, it really makes for a clear path to quite a few wins. And based on the math that I see, I actually did take a position on them to win the league at plus 1,800, simply because the schedule calls for a lot of winnable games. And if they go on a run and they get to the championship game, I'll be able to assess my position and figure out a way to make it profitable for myself.
I'll talk about East Carolina here in a little bit as well. So I like the thoughts. People see that record from last year and how bad they were beaten by bad teams. Not how bad they were beaten, but how ugly the season ended. You know, I mean, a lot of those were close losses, like you said. I mean, they just need half decent quarterback play. It doesn't have to be good. It was just atrocious last year. Mm-hmm. And I'm still convinced that Houston's a good coach. Like, I think he's won enough in the past that I don't think he's just forgotten how to coach immediately. So I agree there. Okay, let's go overrated. I thought this was a little hard to find a team that was overrated in this conference. I'm going to go with Tulane. I'll start. I think they just have so much to replace. They won close games. Great coach to replace. I mean, definitely a great coach to replace. I like Summerall as well, so it's not me saying that I don't like him, but they won a lot of close games. They've covered a lot of spreads in the last few years. I just think they might be a touch overrated. Having said that, I'm not going to be firing away, betting against them like crazy to start the season. This is kind of one where I don't have anybody that I think is wildly overrated here in this conference. So, Duck, do you have anything you like here as far as a team that might be overvalued?
I'm in lockstep with you. I have Tulane written down here in my notes for this, and I believe that their regular season win total it bounced around between 7.5 and 8, and that's pretty shocking from a team that's won double-digit games the last 2 years. People still remember that Cotton Bowl dramatic win against USC. They went on a big roll in conference play last year, but the losses are glaring, right? They have so much production lost on offense. The coaching regime change is just difficult to build continuity when you can't simulate game reps, and I think that there's just too much unknown. You take that in. It's a really sneaky, tough start for Tulane. Southeast Louisiana, yeah, they'll win in that contest. But then They host K-State. They're at Oklahoma. Really sneaky, fierce rivalry matchup at Louisiana. And then they host USF, who is projected to be a top 4 team in this league. And it's really not hard to draw a scenario where Tulane is staring at 1-4 to start. And the back half of the schedule is certainly winnable, but with a brand new coach and a lot of new players at key positions, you're looking around in that locker room if you do start 1-4 and you're kind of just staring at each other blank, like where do we go from here? And that's not indicative of John Summerall's ability to coach. Obviously, he's a proven winner with what he did at Troy. It's just one of those things where there's just too many holes in this team for me to really expect them to go back on a major run and win 9 or 10 games this year. So I don't have a play in pocket. I would certainly lean under for them. And I just think that Tulane is one of those teams, when you talk about the big 3 in this league, that is just due to regress kind of back to the mean on the merits this year.
All right, Ron, what about you?
So you're going to find me laughing because I think you read everything I was going to say. You used the word sneaky. That was my word. You used the first 6 games of the schedule. It's sneaky tough, those first 6 games of the schedule. Tulane's my team too, and I do have, I won't say it's a large play. It's just a play under 8. And I agree with you guys about the coach. This is a good coaching transition, but like you guys hinted at, Tulane won some games they probably shouldn't have won the last year or two. They were just finding ways to win because winning breeds extra confidence and it becomes a habit. And I think for Tulane and that coaching staff, they just expected to win games that they didn't play their best. And that happened a lot. So while I think this conference is, I don't think they have by any means the worst, I could see them going even as high as second in the conference. Memphis has the best talent in the conference. I'm not exactly sold on their coach. And I just think Tulane's in transition, like you guys said. And if I had to pick somebody who would be down just a little for a year, it would be this one.
One other thing I'd like to point out, if we could, on Tulane, 2 things. The first one, real quick, if you just break down with all the talent they had last year, they kind of played with their food a little bit. Look at these results. North Texas, they were 20-point favorites. They won by 7. Rice, they won by 2. At East Carolina, they won by only 3 points. Hosting a really bad Tulsa team as 4 touchdown favorites, they won by 2 points. There's just so much in those results that you can dissect. And when you remove the production, the offensive and defensive production, it's just not a good sign. From a season win perspective, I really like finding the 8. And I would say that if you're not well-versed in regular season wins, it's a lot different than buying a half a point off 7 or off 10 or something of that nature on a week-to-week basis. When you have a 7.5 to 8, it's almost a full win. And I would value that at about 70 cents. So when you're looking at pricing, if you have something around the plus 105 or plus 110 on the under at 7.5, and you can find an under 8 all the way up to minus 140, minus 150, that definitely adds value to the play. And then it takes 9-3 to beat you, which I just don't see this team doing this year. So I think in that particular position that you have at under 8, at worst, you're going to push. And while we're not in the business to push, I really think that with the sneaky tough schedule and the losses, it's really a good position that I would want to have late in the season when they're when all the dust settles.
I think I got plus 110 in Las Vegas.
Nice. So that's insane for under 8. That's an extreme plus EV bet there.
That's checking. Really I said I didn't weigh 160, did I? I'd be hitting myself, but then I said no, it's plus 110.
Yeah, I'm going to have to know where you found that and take out a position there. That's a really astute play.
I like that play too, and I think you do make a good point that this half a win is worth a lot here. Some people say, why are you betting minus 135 when you could have had plus 110 or plus 105 on the other? Sometimes it's just so much far worth it. Like you said, you get to that point where you say, I just don't see anything better than 8-4. If I tie, I'd rather win. But sometimes if you're seeing those teams that you think that's their ceiling, that's their upside, that's a great bet. You take those bets
Yeah.
every single time.
Assign probabilities to it because it changes your win percentage depending on what the odds are. If you're talking about even money at 7.5, you have to think that they're going to go under under that 7.5 more than 50% of the time. If you're talking about 8, if I think it's a 3/4 thing where I think only 1 out of every 4 outcomes are going to be 9 or more, you start getting excited.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good talk. Let's talk about a team here that I don't think too many people have talked about here coming into the season. I don't even know what to think of them. Maybe you guys know better than what I do. Army. So Army has been independent for so long. Army is going back to running the ball more. This is a team that I don't know what to make of them this year. I mean, I know they're well coached. I know the quarterback can run the option. It can be hard when you face good teams, especially teams that are going to see the option a little bit more than they have in the past. They're going to prep for it more than they have in the past. It's hard if you can't throw the ball at least a little bit. Army's defense, usually not great against the pass because they're so used to seeing the triple option in practice. I mean, it's really hard to be very good in the secondary when that's what you practice against all the time. They're very well coached. All these military schools are very well coached. Love watching them play. What are they going to be able to do getting into a conference like this? They're definitely at a speed disadvantage against some of these teams. Doc, I'm going to start with you. What's your kind of expectations for what Army looks like jumping into this conference?
Well, my expectations this year are low, and I'll tell you why. There's a couple things at play. Since Army's been an independent, they've had the flexibility to schedule in certain ways to include multiple FCS teams or multiple other independent teams that are just bad. And they've been able to schedule other conferences bottom feeders, or they've been able to load their schedule with MAC teams consistently year in and year out. They'd play Eastern Michigan or Buffalo or teams like that just would not necessarily overmatch them from a talent standpoint. So now you join a conference, and really the interesting thing about the American is that the teams that they're going to face year in and year out, the option's not going to be a surprise for them anymore because Navy's been in the league now for multiple years. And so teams are conditioned to preparing for different variations of the option. And this particular year, Army is kind of going back to their traditional flex bone option principles where you really get the fullback dive humming, and then you can pop it out to the outside or use quarterback run, which they have done in the past really well. But they kind of got away from that, and their offense was very stagnated at times last year. I mean, just look at the scores where they were scoring 16, 13, 2 times they were shut out. I mean, it was just a bad offensive team because it's not them doing Army things, right? You're used to Army controlling the possession and spending 8, 9, 10-minute drives on the field where they're getting 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and they were really comfortable going for it on 4th down. And it all just went awry last year when they went away from it, all thanks to the cut block rules, which prohibited cut blocking on the exterior, which is why these teams are now at a further disadvantage. But I think them specifically going to the American, the cold water shock factor of facing the triple is not going to be as drastic because these teams are already accustomed to it. And so I think you're playing up in talent. You don't have a lot of exhale spots by scheduling multiple FCS foes. They're not going to have as many bye weeks as they have in years past where they could start their slate early and they always end it the last game of the season at Navy. That'll continue. But the bye week thing based on the conference slate is a little bit different. And I don't see it going extremely successful. I think making a bowl game this year would be a big win for Army.
Good thoughts there. I could see a lot of that too. I think that this is tough to drop them into here and just have fantastic success right away. I didn't bet anything on a season win total for them. I would definitely lean under. Ron, what do you think here on Army? Do you think it's going to be a success right away? Do you think it's going to be a struggle?
I kind of went back and forth on this one because originally I took the Army under 6, and I've got 46 future plays or stuff. I think I mentioned to various people that this is the one that I probably regret a little bit because, but not as much as I did about a week ago. And some of your points are well taken because teams are going to face the option twice in that league. There are some teams that have weeks off before facing the option, and that's very helpful too. Even if you haven't faced it, you get 2 weeks to slant for it. And with 2 bye weeks this year, because of the way the season scales out, that gives an extra chance for teams to have that bye week before they play the Armies and the Navies. So all that's good. I actually think their schedule is the same or a little bit easier than it has been in the past because this league is down, according to my power ratings. So that scared me a little bit. What doesn't scare me is the last time that Army was in a conference. I think it was CUSA. Of course, every team has been in CUSA at one point or another. I think it's a requirement. But Army went 9-41 when they were a CUSA member. So maybe they've learned something from them, but it was a different kind of animal like you guys have hinted at. So I'm keeping my play. It's under 6. I'm not as thrilled with it at all, but there are going to be some growing pains. And the one thing I will mention, since people know me as a special teams guy, traditionally, service academies do not get the best kickers. You see that a lot. But Army had an unbelievable kicker over the last 3 seasons or so. I mean, they knocked it out of the park kicking, and now he's gone. So the loss of a kicker to a team like Army might be problematical.
I like that. I always love the special teams notes. Too many people gloss over that. So fantastic. All right. So let's wrap up the AAC with your favorite win total or future here for the AAC. I'm going to start. I'm going to take East Carolina over 6. I know some people got over 5.5. I can tell you, and I think I've told both you guys this through the DMs. I kind of wish that I was quicker on the season win totals this year, but it was one of those things where family time, betting baseball, putting a lot into all the other sports as well. Still got decent numbers on these. I did get over 6 on East Carolina. I think 5.5 was a fantastic bet. 6, pretty good as well. I do think futures on them are a good try as well. I think that East Carolina's schedule got so much easier from last year. Even if you took last year's team and played it this year, their schedule is going to be better than it was, or their record's going to be better than it was last year by a decent amount. And you could make the argument, I mean, they probably have the best run defense in the conference. And that run defense is going to help them win some games. They lost a lot of close games last year. I'm looking at mine, and I mean, there's only what? You look at the schedule in East Carolina, 1 game where they're a double-digit dog. So this is a team that's going to have a chance almost every single game. They play at Liberty. It certainly at least stand a chance even in that game at home against App State. So most people wouldn't give them much of a chance, but I think they at least have a chance in a game like that. So I like East Carolina over. I know I'm going against you guys take a lot of unders. I take quite a few unders as well, to be fair, especially on those game to game. Some people get frustrated with me, guys. It's like, man, will you ever take an over? I want to root for points. Let's go. Especially in college basketball, I get that a lot. But I'm going to take over for East Carolina as my favorite here in this conference. Ron, what's yours?
East Carolina, I could see. I had them graded out as either 6 or 7 wins. That schedule is pretty easy. I don't have a great feeling for this conference. I don't have my biggest plays by any means in this conference. I need to prove it from Rice. The number's 7 and about 1/3 of the spots, 2/3 of the spots. It's about 6.5. If they go 8-4, they beat me. I understand they have a lot of returning talent. They have a good defense. I've been down on the coach over the past few years. I think he did a credible job last year, but he's pretty predictable offense in my opinion. It's a prove it year for me. I think 7-5, they're happy. 8-4, let's just see it. When I see it, I see it.
Fair. All right, Duck, what do you like here?
This is kind of a hold your nose play, but Temple their regular season win total is under 2.5. And there's a couple of things at play. 3 seasons in a row of 3-9, and this is kind of the end of the line this year for Stan Drayton. And if you go back and watch Temple, they were really competitive last year in certain spots, and even against some pretty decent competition when EJ Warner was playing and when he was healthy. When he was not in the lineup, there was a staunch drop off in motivation, in effort, in execution on offense. It was just so bad to watch their disorganization at times. It was really quite sad to see. And so this year they bring in Evan Simon, who was used really sparingly at Rutgers. He's going to battle this Forrest Brock, who was at Temple and hasn't done a lot. I think he has 15 career pass attempts. Their offensive line is a mess. They're going to try to do a little bit of different stuff on offense, but I just don't see them having a lot of punch to really pile on the wins. And when I look at my power ratings that I hold pretty true to, I have Temple as a substantial underdog, so greater than 7 points in all 12 games. And so one of the things that I'm looking at when I'm making my plays is I'm trying to find logical and realistic combinations that would unlock a loss in this case. And so what are 3 wins, realistic chances that they could have to win, where I could then find a combination to take Temple 3 times on the money line? And then what does that pay, right? So if you look at their 3 shortest positions, projected positions on the season, hosting North Texas, hosting Tulsa, and hosting Army, and their money lines on those will be at least plus 220 in each of those 3 positions. And so you roll those together, and that's what, 22-1 to win those 3 games. And there's not a lot of other winnable spots where you would theoretically think they have a chance, as they're 3 touchdown underdogs in about 6 games, and they're just substantially outclassed and outmatched in this conference. And I just don't see it with Temple. And so when you can get something in the minus 125, minus 130 range for under 2.5, it's that low for a reason. The talent disparity between this team and the teams that they play in conference and non-conference play, for that matter, is staggering. And they also do not have an FCS foe on the schedule. 3 of those wins over the last 3 seasons, they've won 9 total games. 3 of them have been against FCS competition. They don't play an FCS this year, so there's really no exhale spot, and probably the end of the line for Stan Drayton, who was hired on the merits of being a Philadelphia guy and having close ties in the high school ranks, and it's just not working out. There's very little upside on offense, very little to draw from, and I think Temple's in for a rough season. I could really see them going 1-11 or worse.
They want us to fight.
I see that. Fox is encouraging us to vehemently disagree on somebody. So I think
I won't vehemently disagree, but I would, if not for 2 words: Everett Winters. He's their defensive coordinator, and everywhere he's gone, he's failed. And I think I think there are other winnable games on the schedule. I think they have 5 wins in them, but the coaching is just so horrendous. I would never do it.
Yeah, and they looked so much worse without EJ Warner. You're totally right on that. I mean, they looked like it was just no chance. They couldn't put anything up. And I know some people are like, look, EJ Warner makes some bad decisions, can make turnover-worthy plays, but they were just hapless without him. I want to see them be decent without him before I think they have any real chance. I definitely lean toward under. I will say I don't like taking under 2.5 very often, just because, so many things can go wrong or go right for that team that, you kind of just fall into 3 wins. But I think that you're right, that they're going to be big dogs in a lot of games. All right. I want to give a shout out too. We have tripled the audience here in the last few minutes. So appreciate everybody who's tuned in. Almost 300 watching. A lot of you on X right now watching. Appreciate you guys. Give Ron and Duck a follow. They're tagged both on my page there on Kyle Hunter Picks on Twitter or X. I still like calling it Twitter, but I try to catch myself. Let's move on to Conference USA, and let's talk underrated teams first. Let's try to go a little bit quicker on Conference USA too, because this conference is a little less interesting to me than some of the others. Smaller conference, there are some really bad teams in this conference, and one team is just so much better talent-wise and coach-wise to me that there's a little bit less excitement here. Let's go, Duck. Why don't you start us out with a team that you think is underrated in Conference USA?
This is a unique league because I think a lot of these teams are rated appropriately, but I think that a team that you could see not only be much more competitive, but also rack up more wins than what they did certainly last year. But I think Sam Houston State will be much more improved on offense. I think obviously the Keegan Shoemaker experiment didn't work out well, but they kind of started to figure it out. You could see them start to turn the corner after their first 3 games of the season where they were overwhelmed and they really didn't know how to situationally coach. And you saw it specifically in the BYU and Air Force games where their team was really balling out on defense and really competitive in those games. And one example that I'll draw from is they were down 0-14 against BYU with 4 minutes left, and they're on the 37 going in to potentially score. It's 4th and 1, and they punt. And they did the same thing against Air Force where they were down 13-3. There was 3 or 4 minutes left. It's 4th and 1 in opponent territory. 3 minutes to go, and they punt. And so there was just some situational coaching gaffes, and the offense was just not prepared for the FBS leap. But then you really started to see them figure it out. They were hosting Jacksonville State, and they really had that game won, and they flubbed it up on the goal line with about a minute left, and Jacksonville State came down and tied the game and then won it in overtime. And then they were at Liberty, 3 touchdown underdogs. They lost the game by 5. They were throwing into the end zone on 4th and goal with 8 seconds left. I mean, they could have very, very realistically won that game. They blew the UTEP game. They blew the FIU game. And then they won 3 of their last 4. You could have realistically seen a path where they won 6 games last year if it wasn't for situational coaching mismanagement and just a little bit of bad luck in conference play. So I think Sam Houston is one of those teams where you could look up halfway through the season and be like, what in the world? How are they 4-3 or whatever it might be? So I think that's a team that's a little undervalued in Conference USA this season.
So Fox wanted us to disagree a lot. He's going to be disappointed. That was the team that I was going to say was underrated too. I like Sam Houston.
We should qualify this too. We didn't share notes before this.
That's right. We did not share notes before this. I think we will disagree at some point here. We're going to talk about enough teams that we're going to have some kind of disagreement. But I like Sam Houston State. They were playing so much better at the end of last year. And though they had some questionable coaching at times last year, they do have a coach and a staff that have been consistently winning at a smaller level. I think that now that they're used to playing at this level, they will definitely be better. And the defense is good enough that it keeps them in games. The offense just has to be decent. And last year it wasn't. I think it can be this year. They have good tight ends. I like their tight ends quite a bit. They'll throw to them a decent amount this year. I think they'll be quite a bit improved. So I'll try to keep it a little bit quicker there. But Ron, who do you have?
I put 2 teams together primarily because I figured you'd poach one of them, and you did. Sam Houston State's the obvious choice. They basically had a 206-228 ratio when they went 2-6, and once they figured it out, they were more than competitive. This league isn't good enough to hold them down in 2024. So I'm going to go way off the radar with an underrated team because if not, the coach is gone, and that's FIU. We've got a team that deserved its low power rating last year. But let's face it, McIntyre's been there. He's been a program builder. This isn't a tough coaching league by any means. They were already 4-8, I think, last year. It's hard to believe that they couldn't win 4 this year. All they have to do, for example, is fix the turnover ratio. Each turnover is worth 3.75 points in college football. They're -9. That makes up 35 or pretty close to 35 points. If they can get that to a flat ratio, I think FIU should win 5 or 6 games this year. Let's just keep it simple.
All right. I don't know what to think of FIU. I mean, they should be better. They have resources. I think they have a good coach. They just looked so bad in some of the games last year. It's hard to trust them a lot. But, in this league, I think it makes sense for FIU to be a team that, should be better than what they were last year. They've gotten poor quarterback play many times in the last few years. So I'm not going to vehemently disagree, but I don't necessarily agree that much on that one either. So I'll just be,
I thought it was under the radar.
yeah, I'll be kind of neutral on that one.
One of my favorite stat lines in any game last year was by FAU quarterback Grayson James. In his first game of the season, he passed for 4 yards against Louisiana Tech, 5 for 14 for 4 passing yards.
That was just, I remember watching that game.
All uphill from now.
And if I could just chime in real quick, you'll get a real good barometer on FIU and where they're at with their offensive explosion when they host Central Michigan in week 2. Now, Central Michigan was an absolute train wreck in passing defense. Their back seven was consistently blown coverage and out of position in a MAC conference where there was not a ton of robust and explosive passing attacks. And Central Michigan was so bad, they allowed 500 passing yards against New Hampshire's passing attack. And so if FIU doesn't have explosive plays in the passing game against Central Michigan, hosting that game in week 2 really could be in trouble. If they do have a lot of success, that'll also be a barometer for where they're headed. So that'll be a key game to watch. If you like FIU, I really want to see how they perform against Central Michigan.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like the fact that you're singling out games now and not waiting till the week of to look for different patterns and tendencies. That's what handicapping is about.
Absolutely. That's a sign of a great handicapper. When you already are looking for something, you're taking notes ahead of time saying, I got to watch this. Even if it's not to bet on something in that game, you learn something about going forward to bet for the future games. So I think that's very good. Ron, I'm going to let you start on overrated teams here in Conference USA.
Yeah, I'm going to make this quick because I think the whole conference is overrated. Players have been poached. Coaches have left. The coaches that are coming in are in most cases weaker than the coaches that left. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't think anybody's overrated because I don't think, other than Liberty, you can make a case that anybody's rated. Even Jacksonville State lost a ton of talent. We're just betting that their scheme and the fact that Rich Rod knows how to coach is going to put them to the level that we're used to. But this is not a good conference.
Duck, what do you think here?
You know, I've taken some positions on regular season win unders on that merit that the whole league has taken a notch down, and it's really a really bad power rated league. Yeah, I don't know if I have a truly overrated squad, but I mean, are we 100% sure that Liberty is just going to absolutely walk through this schedule and blast everybody with all the pieces? I mean, they do have some transition and they've lost some pieces as well. And they're certainly the best team in the league, but to just assume that they're going to go 11-1 or better, I don't know. I think that they might be in some close games again this year. And this is a team that when they are massive favorites laying a bunch of points, that defense was really bad last year at stretches where they could not get stops. They could not get off the field on third down, and they allowed their fair share of explosiveness. That reared its ugly head in quite a few situations. But last 3 games of the year, they had UTEP, UMass, and New Mexico State running all up and down the field on them. So I think I'm not running to the window to lay minus 200 on them to win the league. And ATS, they may not be a profitable team to lay massive points with.
So I think it depends on what you mean by whether they're overrated. Are they overrated compared to who they're playing against? I mean, they're going to look really good against the teams they're playing against, in my opinion. Are they going to do well ATS? I don't know if they'll do well ATS because they're going to be laying big numbers here. And like you said, they kind of played with their food last year too. I mean, this is a team that, especially in the secondary, has some weaknesses that will be exposed. There's not a lot of great passing attacks in Conference USA, but they'll play some teams who can throw it around on them a bit. I do think, though, that when it gets down to it, Salter is a fantastic quarterback. They have great backups now. Berger is a good backup from App State. I think that Chadwell is the best coach you could argue he's the best coach at the group of 5 level. Like, he is a really good coach. And I think him being so good, their recruiting being so much better than everybody else, I kind of actually think minus 200 or minus 190 something on Liberty is actually a pretty good bet, because I think they're going to be in the title game. They're going to be laying so much more than that, to where, it's kind of like a money line bet in that game. Even if Salter gets hurt, I think they're going to be in the title game. They have too much good talent there. So that's my only pushback on that, is that I do think that Liberty is so much better than everybody else. I think that Liberty's defense could be down some, and it could lead to overs. So while we like to bet unders, I think Liberty could be a good over team. We'll see what pace they play at. This is a team I do have tagged to try to play overs, especially when they're playing against those good passing attacks. You think of like a Western Kentucky, Middle Tennessee. I'm not even looking at the schedule, so I don't know who they play or when they play right now. But those types of teams are the teams that can move the ball on a team like Liberty. So I think Liberty is the best team in the conference by a decent margin. Overrated, I had New Mexico State, and it's hard to say too overrated, because it looks like the marketplace isn't that high on them, so maybe average Joe is overrating them. The marketplace might not be overrating them. It is kind of hard to find teams that are overrated in this conference, because, like you guys said, this is a bad conference. Everybody kind of realizes it's a bad conference. But I think that that's a big change for New Mexico State. And, they won a lot of close games. Pavia was a really good player for them. The coaching staff was tremendous. I think that's a lot. We talked a little bit about Liberty. That was the team I wanted to discuss here. I want to get Ron's opinion on Liberty. So is Liberty like clear, far and above everybody else? What do you think of a minus 195 on Liberty to win the conference? You think that's a stupid bet? You think that's a good bet? Somewhere in between? What do you think?
I think for this conference, it's a good bet. They host Jacksonville State, the presumed second best team in the league. I have their toughest game being Sam Houston, and we've already discussed Sam Houston, but I don't think Sam Houston's going to run the table by any means. So they're in the top 2. They deserve to be at least minus 200. There's a formula for beating them. Not everybody's the University of Oregon, but you can beat them by controlling the ball and running on them. That was a pretty much a one-sided game. I don't think Liberty's a great team, but in this conference, they just stand out.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I just want to touch on this. Some people have been talking about, will Liberty be able to get back to the playoff? They better really have a good record going into the playoff, because the way they looked against Oregon last year is going to matter if it's close between them and somebody else. I could see, some people taking positions on Liberty reaching the playoff, what kind of group of 5 teams going to be able to make the playoff. But if you're taking that position, you're thinking Liberty's going to run the table. Because they've got to have a really good season. What's your take on that, Duck? How good would they have to be to get into the playoff?
I don't see Liberty having much of a chance to get in the playoff, and I think that performance against Oregon will hold a lot of weight, and the committee is not going to want to have that performance in probably the 12-5, I guess is what it would be, or whatever position that they would end up in. I think that a key game to watch in this particular discussion will be Boise State. We'll get to them in the Mountain West, but Boise State is at Oregon early in the season, and a projected line on that would be about 25, which is a massive spread. And I think that you'll see a max and spirited effort from Boise State when just respective to the playoff and will you make the playoff. I think if Boise State goes into Eugene and they lose by 14, that's a win for them. And that will effectively eliminate Liberty, because Boise State could end up 10-2, and that performance is going to hold a lot more weight than anything Liberty does. Same thing with Memphis. If they have a respective showing against FSU, even if you lose by 17 or 14, that's a win compared to anything that Liberty could possibly do because of who Liberty plays and how these teams are power rated, and the body of work is just not going to be there. I don't care if they go 12-0. I just don't see a path for Liberty to be given a second chance based on how putrid that performance was in the bowl game last year against Oregon.
Yeah, and they can't lose games. I agree with you on that. And even if they go unbeaten, it's going to depend on what other people do. I think let's finish this conference here briefly with favorite win total. I couldn't come up with another one that I really liked that much. So Sam Houston State over 4.5 is definitely my favorite. Duck, what do you have here?
So I took a position on New Mexico State under 4.5, and I also my favorite win total is when you look at a team that moves up from the FCS ranks to the FBS ranks. The process is so defined for what a team typically tries to do to get prepared. Well, the window and the cost and the opportunity for moving up has closed, respectively, for some of these small college league teams. That Kennesaw State expedited that process tremendously. And you look at their last couple of years in FCS, just specifically last year, they played a predominantly FCS schedule. They beat Division II Tusculum. They beat NCCAA participant Virginia Lynchburg, who is a program that's known for having very little funding. They didn't have an athletic training staff. They couldn't pay their coaching salaries. They had their players living in dormitories that had holes in the floor. I mean, it was just an atrocious situation, hardly a real team. And then they beat this other team called Lincoln University out of Oakland, and they're a team that plays not even NCAA sanctioned football, and they don't play home games. They play all road games, and they get scheduled by FCS bottom feeders who need a win on their schedule. Consistently, they're going to play teams, and the scores will be like 58-7 or 65-7. Kennesaw State beat them 28-12. And it was a really competitive game for whatever reason in the fourth quarter. Kennesaw State is just not ready, and you're going to see that they are the worst power-rated team in FBS, and I have them a dog in all 12, just like the Temple situation. I don't see a path to them being very competitive, and I think during the season you'll see that their power rating is going to get worse and worse and worse. They're going to get blasted at UTSA, Louisiana, San Jose State. Even their FCS game against UT Martin is not even an assured win. I think they're going to be 7-point underdogs in that matchup. So you look at Jack State, at Middle Tennessee, at Western Kentucky, at UTEP. I don't see a path to them having much success on the field this year because they're just so far behind in the trenches. Their offense, there's kind of a shakeup in the offensive locker room because they were playing Brian Bohannon, their head coach. They were playing his son at quarterback, and he was playing poorly, yet he was still seeing the field. And I just don't know how all that's going to adjudicate itself out, but it's a team that's not ready. And I would encourage anybody to try to get out ahead of that for the first couple of weeks of the season because you really can't power rate Kennesaw State low enough. You got to kind of forget what they've been over their success in FCS because it's a different team. They don't have the same athletes, and they're just not ready to transition.
I like it. Some great thoughts there. I know you know the FCS well, far better than I do. That's fantastic. And the fact that they had that 28-12 game is really interesting based on everything else about that school. So Kennesaw, this is even to Conference USA is just a massive jump. And I know some people think that I've seen some people opine that they didn't really try last year. They were kind of getting ready for this year. I always hate to trust something like that or to count on something like that. I do have enough question marks about Kennesaw that I didn't know if I wanted to bet the season win total on them. Just kind of wait back and see. But I respect your opinion. I think that's a sharp play. So, Ron, did you have anything you like from a season win total here?
Let me close the book on Kennesaw State. I think they only played 9 games last year. I think in some case, it was a weird season for them. And I just hate that we're adding teams left and right. I'd like to subtract teams so it could be a little easier for me to deal with it. Book that you're very familiar with, Kyle, had a couple of weeks of MTSU sitting at total of 5. And I think it's a coaching downgrade for MTSU. I'm okay with them trying a dual threat quarterback to see how that works against this league. Maybe it does work, but I'm not enamored with the rest of the team. Like I said, a coaching downgrade. They have to go to a bowl to beat me. They have to get to 6-6 to beat me. And I'm going against them. That's probably my favorite one in the conference.
No, I could see that as well. I see where you're coming from there. All right. Well, let's close the book there on Conference USA, switch over to the MAC. All right. Well, I'm going to try to keep it moving here a little bit quicker. See what time it is. We love talking college football. We'll go a little bit over what we thought we would go, but I'll try to keep the pace going here fairly quickly. Let's go to the MAC. All right. Return of the MAC. Here we are. MACtion is fantastic. Love it. Those Tuesday nights in November are always a lot of fun. So let's talk about the MAC and underrated team first. I will let somebody else go first because I think we could match here on this one again. Ron, what do you think? Underrated team in the MAC?
I'll give you 2 quickies, and I'm not convinced of either one of them. I think Bowling Green built their team slowly but surely to get to this point, and now it's put up or shut up time for the staff because they culled the roster as best as they could before there was nil and everything to redshirt, to do everything to get this program up the right way, not have a quick fix because they were going through a lot of 2-10s. So I think they did a good job in terms of building it for this moment. Let's see what happens. It's never wise to underestimate Eastern Michigan. I like their coach, Creighton. I think you do too, Kyle. Weird movement, a couple of competing services going one way or the other on Eastern Michigan week 1. The number seems a little low on them, but they don't have a great talent. They don't have a great power rating. I just not convinced that we should be going against the coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, Eastern Michigan quickly, bet them as a dog, fade them as a favorite.
Yeah.
Has been a fantastic way to bet Eastern Michigan games. But Creighton is one of the best coaches. I mean, he does the very best he can with the talent that he gets. I wouldn't want to bet a season win total under with Eastern Michigan. It would definitely scare me. Having said that, you look at the talent that they get, and you're like, how can I bet an over? I can't bet an over here. So I had to pass on that one. But Duck, why don't you go next? Underrated team here.
I just want to make one quick point about Eastern Michigan. I won't be long-winded, but the time to play Eastern Michigan, certainly this season, is they're on a bye week October 5th. Then they host Miami of Ohio on October 12th. Now, Miami of Ohio plays at Northwestern. Then they have a week 2 bye. Then they host their big-spirited rival Cincinnati. And then September 21st, they're at the Cathedral to play Notre Dame. Then they come back for homecoming against UMass. And then October 5th, they're at Toledo. And then October 19th, they're at one of their other major rivals. They're hosting Ohio. In between, there's this sneaky, tough road spot at the Factory to play Eastern Michigan in a spot where there's a lot of pomp and circumstance for Miami of Ohio for the duration of their schedule leading up to it. This might be a spot where they inappropriately exhale, thinking they can take the week off, and Eastern Michigan could jump up and bite them. So I have that circled in red ink for a play on Eastern Michigan at about plus 14 or so. Underrated team is Bowling Green. I definitely suspect Bowling Green is going to take a step up this year and join the class of the MAC, which has been Toledo certainly has the best talent in the MAC year in and year out, and Miami of Ohio. I think you're going to see Miami of Ohio and Toledo kind of come back to the pack this year, and I just didn't feel Bowling Green was appropriately priced. I think their next logical progression in Scott Loeffler's tenure is to take that next leap. I like what I saw last year from both Connor Bazelak and their backup quarterback, Camden North. I'd like to see more of him in the power packages that they used with him. And they have a stud tight end, Harold Fannin, who will likely get drafted into the NFL after next year. I like the running back room. I like what they bring back on defense. I think Bowling Green is underrated, and I have them in the MAC title game, and I have a plus 850 in hand.
Bowling Green was going to be mine as well. I figured that we would match some on that. But I will say this. One thing that gives me a little bit of pause about them is I don't love Bazelak. Bazelak has been wildly inconsistent at times. He makes bad decisions with the football. I kind of hope they run the football a little bit more. I like Orth coming in there. I think he should probably come in more than he has in the past. I do think, though, I've been impressed with their how much they're improving on defense. Like a couple of years ago, they were atrocious on defense. Remember, they've moved on, got a better defensive coordinator, certainly, and they really improved a lot. This is a good MAC unit in the defensive secondary. They only gave up 4.1 yards per carry last year as well. I think they'll be even better this year. So, I have to like them at least somewhat. I think I kind of like the Bowling Green futures better than I like a season win total over, just because I think there's decent value on the futures price there. As far as, let's go to overrated, and let's go. I'm going to take overrated Toledo. So Toledo 8.5 has been the win total. Yeah, Will makes a good point. Let's bring that up here real quick. They were +9 turnovers last year. It is rare for me to think a team is underrated when they're +9 turnover margin. I do think Bowling Green has gotten stronger. A lot of the other teams that are in the top section of the MAC there have gotten weaker. Even Miami. I mean, you could talk about Miami. Gabbert's really good, but Gabbert gets hurt like every year. I don't want him to get hurt, but he gets hurt every year. And they always have some backup or a third stringer playing, and they don't have a good backup like they've had in the past. So if, it would really scare me to have Miami of Ohio season win total over, because if he goes out, I think you lost. Miami is very reliant on him. Toledo is much worse. I'll continue there. I think Toledo, Jason Candle has done this for years now, where he has like a couple games that they lose that they just have absolutely no business losing. They really didn't do that last year as much as what they have done. I think that this year, when you look at Toledo's a team where, Boone is a big loss at running back. He was really good, very good. I think they're still decent at running back, but, you lose Finn, who transferred out, and you lose Boone. They have good receivers. Gleason's a decent starter. He's played here in the past. He takes a lot of shots downfield. I think the defense is definitely worse than what they have been too. Mitchell's a massive loss. I mean, how often do you have somebody from Toledo being drafted so high in the NFL draft? He is just completely locking down one side of the field. Without him, they're going to be much worse against the pass. I think betting against Toledo, ATS wise this year, will probably do pretty well. So they're my overrated team. Ron, what do you think here?
I'm not going to deviate. I have to talk about Toledo because universally, year after year, and I've been using power ratings for longer than people have been born. So I can tell you that you don't need power ratings to talk about Toledo because they don't work. They haven't worked. They didn't work last year. They didn't work the year before. They just don't work. It's crazy how this happens with Toledo. And I think it's a coaching problem, but Toledo has not had a losing season since 2009. So it's hard to rag on them too much, but I agree with you guys. I don't think this is their best team. I do think that they come back to the pack a little bit. Nothing kind of makes sense with me when I handicap them. That's why I'm not afraid to go against them when they're a double-digit favorite. I think I'll keep doing that. I think they'll find a way to go to break people's hearts sometimes. I'll just leave it at that.
Doc, what do you have here for an overrated team?
I have Toledo, I hate to say, and I don't have a lot to add. Everything in my notes has been covered. I don't like Jason Candle. Year in and year out, they have the best talent in the MAC. He's won one MAC title. You could probably argue that he should have won 3 or 4. I've got the situational coaching spots that have cost them games where year in and year out, they lose a game as 14 or 17-point favorites that they have no business losing. And they certainly play up to competition, but they also play down to competition. So everything that you guys have said was all in my notes to discuss. They lose all 5 starters on the offensive line this year. That may not rear its ugly head because they open with Duquesne and UMass. And so by the time those games conclude, you'll probably have your 5 offensive guys that have 140 snaps under their belt. So the continuity will start to develop. So it won't be as magnified, but I don't see them having the punch on offense, even with the skilled receiver room. They probably have the best receivers in the MAC. I look for Toledo to come back to the pack. That's the best way I can say it. And I just don't see them when it comes down to situational coaching and players that you can lean on to take the adversity on their shoulders. From what I heard him say in MAC media days, they like Tucker Gleason, but yeah, it's a big loss to replace Finn and Penny Boone and 5 offensive line starters. I'm out on Toledo. You're certainly paying a premium if you bet on the regular season win total or the conference future. You're paying for the name brand.
Absolutely, you are. Looking forward at Toledo's schedule a little bit. They play at Western Kentucky, at Mississippi State the week before, so they're going to pass 2 teams that want go against 2 teams that want to pass a lot. We're going to find out about the defense at that point. And then when you get in the MAC schedule, they don't play that hard of a schedule. I mean, that would be a positive, you would say, if you think they can still win a decent amount of games. They could still have a pretty good record this year and be a worse team by a decent amount. That wouldn't be shocking. But when you play games like Northern Illinois, that'll be a tough game for them. Even at Eastern Michigan, they're going to be favored by quite a bit in that game, but that wouldn't be a game I'd want to lay the points in. I know that. That'd be Eastern Michigan or pass. We'll see when we get to that point how healthy the teams are and everything. But don't trust Toledo. I think that this could be a year where they kind of slid back toward the pack. All right. So favorite win total in the conference. I'm going to go first on this one. I'll let you guys talk first on the others. So we'll see. We might match again. Who knows? We've matched more than I thought we would, even at this point. I'm going to go with Ohio under. I took under 6.5 here. I have to take the under here. I looked at this one for a long time. Ohio, they lost so much from last year, and who they replaced them with are just not, going to be at the same level. I think Rourke was really good, and honestly, their offense was not very good, even with Rourke last year. They leaned on the defense being fantastic. Massive drop off. I mean, Harris transferred out too at quarterback, so you don't have somebody else to lean on. Parker Navarro, the expected starter, definitely big step down. I think they lost their top 6 wide receivers, something like that. 5 or 6 wide receivers, just insane. Defensively, I think that the front 7 is just much worse than it's been in the past few seasons. The weak schedule in the MAC is the only thing that's kind of keeping them from really completely falling apart. I think Ohio is much worse than they have been. I think betting against them against the spread makes some sense here too. But under the 6.5, I took decent amount of juice on that one. I would take under 6 as well. So Ron, what is your favorite season win total?
Okay. I didn't pull the trigger on Ohio, but I certainly lean that way. It's one of the ones I didn't. I saw a lot of volatility. Test case for all those people losing. Can they rebound in the MAC or not? I'm good because nobody took my team, although I think Duck would take it if he had the chance to go first. Mike New is 30-55 in seasons that are not COVID seasons. And Mike New is on my unfortunately coveted bottom 5 coaches list, which usually sees 2.6 coaches per year leave the profession because they're fired. So we'll see what happens to Ball State and Mike New. He lost a 1,000-yard running back. The defense was shredded in terms of the amount of talent returning. I have Ball State under 4.5. Let's just keep it at that.
Duck, what do you have here?
I have both positions, and those were going to be my 1A and 1B. So I'll just add with Ohio. The losses are staggering. Their running back Bangura is gone. Wiglis is a huge loss at receiver for Ohio. Another big loss is their tight end Kazmarek. Now, their tight end Kazmarek transferred to Ohio State, and he shined in the spring game. He's a MAC talent that's now playing at Big Ten Ohio State, and he's going to see the field in meaningful situations for them. That's a huge loss for Ohio, something that you just cannot replace in the receiver room. Too many losses. I think Tim Albin's done a great job with this team. This year's a regression year. And frankly, I also have an under 4.5 for Ball State. That Mike New COVID year is looking more and more like an aberration than it was the norm. And you've got a situation where the defense is just massive overhaul. Everybody has gone from a defense that was able to play above expectation last year and keep them in games, even though they only won the 4 games last year. Their starting quarterback is now playing corner. They don't have a lot to draw on. They do have a tight end, Koziol, who's pretty good, but Ball State also, the schedule is up against them. Ball State has their first bye week in week 1. Every other team is playing this year on August 31st or in the week 1 realm. Ball State's at home. And then they host Missouri State, who's a decent FCS team who's transferring up to Conference USA next year. They're at Miami, at Central Michigan, at James Madison, at Kent, at Vandy, all right in a row, 5 of 6 on the road. And they don't get another bye week until before game 8. I don't see a lot of winnable spots on the schedule for Ball State. It's kind of one of those plays where you kind of know what your team's going to be, and this team is going to take a big step back on defense. It's not even going to be close to what we saw from a competitive standpoint and a resistance standpoint on defense. So I hate that I don't have more to add, but I have both those plays in pocket, and my favorite of the two is Ball State under 4.5.
Nice. All right. That wraps up the MAC. Let's go to the Mountain West. Fun conference. I like the Mountain West. We've gotten some really good games in the Mountain West, both in college football and college basketball here the last couple of years. Let's talk Mountain West here. Let's start with an underrated team. Duck, I'm going to let you go first because I don't think you've gone first, and I want to see if I'm hoping we disagree on one here soon.
So I talked ad nauseum just last night about the Mountain West, and I think it's a fascinating league because of you have a lot of coaching turmoil, right? You've got 7 new coaches in the league. You have coaches that were fired. You have transition late in the season, late in the game. My team that is probably appropriately rated, but a team that I feel could outperform expectations is Colorado State. They're a high variance team. I like Fowler Nicolosi. I like what they bring back on offense. I think they're going to play a lot more physical football this year. I look for them to try to run the ball more. I think the schedule sets up for them to have plenty of winnable games. And just doing the math on Colorado State and where the chips fall, I think that they're going to have just as good a shot as anybody to get into that position where they're going to at least be able to decide what happens in the Mountain West slate. Now, looking at the schedule for Colorado State, no Boise, no UNLV, winnable games against San Jose, Air Force, New Mexico, Nevada, Wyoming. I mean, they could pile up the wins quick. There's certainly also some antagonistic points to be made, right? They struggled at times last year on defense. Their turnovers were bad. It seemed at times that Fowler Nicolosi was flippant with the football, and there was just some carelessness there. The emotions got the best of them at times, single-handedly cost them the Colorado game. But I look at the non-conference after they collect their check and get their teeth kicked in by Texas, which still may cover that game, but Northern Colorado certainly winnable. Hosting Colorado, I think, is a game that's winnable. And if that line's 11.5 or so, you got to look at the Rams ATS. UTEP certainly winnable. And then all the conference games that I just mentioned, I don't have them priced in conference play as a dog of bigger than 8. Most of the games they're favored in projected, and I've got them at +8 at Fresno. So I think Colorado State's a team that could make some noise.
All right, Ron, who do you like here as an underrated team?
Okay. I wasn't going to go with Colorado State. I was hoping to go with another team, although you see my hat. It's hard to find a hat that I bet an over on. So Colorado State, because I don't bet many overs, but I kind of agree with you with Colorado State. Year 3 from Mike Norvell. It's got to get it done now. By the way, Mountain West teams only play 7 games this year in conference. Just something to note. And you mentioned Air Force. Air Force would be the team. And it's hard to say that they're underrated after their great start last year and so on, and the fact that they returned so few starters. But Air Force is used to, service academies generally return fewer starters, and Air Force should be used to that. Not only that, it's if you count Boise State's interim coach as a new coach, 8 of the coaches in this league are new. One of them's in their second year, a couple are in their third year, and then you got Troy Calhoun, who's been there 18 years, or this is his 18th year. Shouldn't that account for something? Air Force has beaten Colorado State a ton of times, so they do hold an advantage in that game. And they do not play Boise this year, which is a rarity because they used to be in the same division. But when you're only playing 7 games and you don't have a division anymore, they're not playing. So that's a perk as well. Air Force's number is 6.5. I think even though Air Force is considered a good team, and I would agree they're not as good as last year, certainly probably not as good defensively as last year, but for this league and for the slate of opponents they're facing and the slate of new coaches they're facing, I think they're plenty good enough to get 4 wins in conference, which is their number, and hopefully threaten the 6.5 wins.
I like that because it's one that most people wouldn't pick right away. So I like going with Air Force there. The other thing about Air Force is we know they return next to nobody, although that's not really that new for them. They do that pretty often. There's a lot of turnover there. And Calhoun's been a great coach. I think he's very trustworthy, been good against the spread. The question mark is the defense. They're going to give up too many points this year. I think 6.5 does make it look like this team might not be rated quite as highly as they usually are, and I could see that as well. I will say Colorado State was my team as well, and Duck and I did not talk about that ahead of time. 4-8 against the spread last year. I think this team's going to do well against the spread this year. Fowler Nicolosi made bad decisions last year. He was a freshman, and he made some great throws too. I mean, he has clear, very good talent. I think Fowler Nicolosi is a very talented quarterback. He's 6'3". He makes some of those big time throws that other guys in Group of 5 usually can't make. I think that Colorado State has one major weakness, and that's their secondary. People are going to beat them throwing the football, but their front 7 on defense is getting better. Their offensive line, guys, remember a couple of years ago when they had like the worst offensive line in all of football? They were terrible. Their offensive line is at least decent now, and that's made a big difference. They have a little bit of a running game to at least keep people honest. So not a team that I bet from a season win total perspective or even futures, just one that I think could be good against the spread throughout the course of the season. I like Colorado State. So I will go on to overrated, and maybe we'll get disagreement here. I don't know. I'm going to go with UNLV. They were 10-4 against the spread last year. I think UNLV is still a good team. So this is not me saying UNLV is a bad team. It's me saying that it's hard when you go 10-4 against the spread to not be a little bit overvalued the next year. And the schedule they play this year is much tougher. I mean, they are really ramping up schedules. Look at UNLV playing at Kansas, then playing Fresno State, playing Syracuse, a Syracuse team that, I don't know exactly what to expect from Syracuse, but the hopes are pretty high for them. UNLV goes to Utah State. They go to Oregon State. Then they come back to play Boise. That's a tough schedule. That's definitely a really tough schedule. I think UNLV against the spread would be tough to match what they did last year. And I think that they will probably be a good team to fade this year, even if they have a good team. This is one of those circumstances where their team actually might be better on paper this year than they were last year, but you're not going to see it in the win-loss record, I don't think.
I have a question for you. I have a question for you, Kyle, before I go. Mm-hmm. I was surprised the quarterback transferred. Do you know anything about that? I mean, such a great situation. They went from not going to a bowl for a decade to going, and then he transferred. Do you have a backstory on that at all?
I do not. I was surprised he transferred as well because he was in a good situation. Duck, do you have anything that you know any more about why that might have happened? Or, I assume he was still going to be in line to be the guy. I know they have 2 good FCS transfers that are kind of battling for the job. I don't think he would have lost the job. I don't know. Do you know anything about this?
The NIL culture and being surrounded by beautiful women in Southern California is really the only couple things that I can identify. It's kind of it's the lay of the land, and I think for college football purists, it's something that I don't love to see. It's not that I'm not taking a position on whether or not players should or should not be compensated. I'll save my personal opinion on that for later. But this is the negative effect of the environment that we're in, right? Where you have teams and players that have breakout seasons, and nobody plays for legacy anymore, or to reset the school record books, or to leave your mark on a program. It's just not something that's discussed. It's not coached. It's not recruited to. And at this current state of affairs with where we're at with the whole dynamic of college football, it's really all about the money. That's why you have 18 teams in a conference all the way from Piscataway, New Jersey to Seattle. And it's why players are driving Lambos around campus. It's just the way it is. It's about the money, and being in that sort of environment is the reports that I had.
Yeah, sad to see. Where were we? We're overrated. A lot of teams are properly priced. We saw, you guys mentioned New Mexico State, their win total dropped drastically. San Jose State dropped drastically. I will say this, the late coaching change at Fresno has me a little worried about that program. I feel bad for Tedford. I mean, he had to go through it again. He was probably not at full strength as a coach at the end of last season when they had a couple of surprising losses. You could see Fresno drop just a bit, but maybe you don't see it in the record because this is such a weird league with all these new coaches and stuff. But I would keep an eye out on Fresno just in case with the late coaching change.
Duck, what do you think here?
I'm struggling to answer this question about trying to find a team that's really overvalued. I guess the contrarian argument would be, is Boise like a slam dunk to make the title game? Are they head and shoulders above everyone else? When I look at Boise State football, especially last year, I look at a defense that had chinks in the armor, a team that could not put teams away with a kill shot and bury them. Teams were left to hang around against Boise, and it single-handedly cost them the Colorado State and Fresno State games because they couldn't put those teams away. It cost them the Memphis game. It cost them the UCF game, and they just didn't really have a killer instinct. And now recent developments are they bring in five-star Malachi Nelson, and he doesn't even win the job, right? The incumbent Maddox Madsen has won the starting quarterback job, so who's to say what's going to happen with Malachi Nelson? Ashton Genty is fantastic. The offensive line is going to be robust. I think they're going to get back to prototypical Boise State type of offense where they are able to pound the football and then play action it with the tight end game and with deep passing explosiveness. But are we 100% positive that the defensive issues are fixed and that they're just going to roll through Mountain West play, which will include both Wazoo and Oregon State out of the Pac-2? I'm not convinced that they're a team that's going to be undefeated in conference play, or a team that's maybe a shoe-in in the G5 to make the playoff. I'm just not sure until I see that the defensive aptitude is there on this team. It's really all I could come up with for overrated.
All right. So for Boise, I did bet Boise to win this conference at a much better price than what's out there right now. I think
you got something to
Boise,
say on that too.
Yeah. That's. I think it does concern me a little bit that Nelson didn't win the job. I mean, I'm kind of curious what your guys' thoughts are, because is this just one of those cases? I mean, occasionally you get this 5-star kid that was supposed to be amazing, that he, transfers from one place to another. He's supposed to be really, really good. I'm not saying he was a 5-star kid, but another guy actually that was at Boise for a good while that was supposed to be really good, Bachmeier. Bachmeier really hasn't been any good anywhere. So, I mean, I'm not trying to bust college kids, but he's been overrated. Maybe he'll do better at his new stop, maybe not, but he didn't do very well at La Tech either. And I guess, is Nelson one of those guys, or is it a sign of concern? I mean, Madsen is pretty good. I think Maddox Madsen is a pretty good player. I don't find any problems with him, but I expected Nelson to win the job when he transferred there. Obviously, I think he expected it too. The offensive line's very good. Ginty is so good that I think they'll dominate most teams just running the football. Too many teams in this conference can't stop the run well. I think Boise will overwhelm a lot of those teams. As far as the defense, the 4 starters are back on the defensive line. They add the guy from Ball State that was pretty good. I think the defensive line will be pretty good. The secondary would be my question for Boise here. They're good special teams wise, which could make a pretty big difference in some of these games. I do think Boise is the best team in the conference by a decent amount, but does that mean they're not overrated against the spread? Not necessarily. I could see that. Ron, what do you think here about Boise State? Where do you fall on this Boise State debate?
Yeah, so I'm reading my notes again, and I kind of agree with both of you. We have to see the defense, but they do return a lot of starters as compared to most of the conference. They will run over teams. My biggest question really isn't quarterback. Whatever they decide, that's fine. They know the quarterback that they selected, so they think they have the best guy. And if it doesn't work out, they have the other guy in pockets. So I'm not worried about that. I just don't know enough about the coach to think that, okay, so he won a few games as interim, but at Boise, aren't you expected to win those games? That's why the other guy was let go. So until I get more data on the coach itself, I can't say they'll run away and hide. But in my opinion, they are clearly the deserved favorite in the conference.
Yeah, I think those are all fair points. A good discussion there.
One little nugget on Boise. We alluded to a couple of different things. Their first game of the season, they're at Georgia Southern, so it's quite a road trip. And I think Georgia Southern could be better than people think of them this year. But let's think about this. So the weakness for Boise is defensive secondary and pass defense. And Georgia Southern could not stop the run last year, and they will not stop the run against Boise State. They will not get stops. Boise will be in 3rd and short. They'll extend drives. They're going to score a lot of points. That could be a really high-scoring affair. I think that both of those teams' strengths offensively play into defensive weaknesses, and that could be one where you look at where that total currently sits. Might have to dig more into that one going over.
This is a game I want to look at more. I agree with you. I was waiting to see what Georgia Southern would do at quarterback, and I know that was kind of decided there. So I want to look at that one a little bit more. And Georgia Southern's a team that I always prefer to bet an over with them than an under. We know how they play. So that'll be a fun one to see. And let's wrap up the Mountain West, guys. Favorite win total in the conference. Ron, how about you start us here?
Okay, you guys get to duplicate me, or maybe not. Another late coaching change, but I've always been amazed that Utah State could do nothing against the run, yet still find a way to get to a bowl game. They were 0-7, though, against bowl teams last year, if I'm correct. Maybe they pull a Northwestern. They had the late, that was a strange situation because Blake Anderson's a stand-up guy, but he got, there's a he said, she said going on. So without going into that, I'm assuming that like Northwestern, Utah State players had the 30-day window period to transfer, but they decided to stick it out. But if you really look at Northwestern, it was smoke and mirrors last year. I don't think Utah State's that same team. So I went under 5.5 wins, and I'm comfortable with that.
Doc, what do you think here?
I love that position, and they actually did have a key guy. One guy, Micah Davis, left and went to Ole Miss, and so that's a big loss in the receiver room for Utah State. And it's really they're going to have another outside threat develop, because otherwise people are going to star Jalen Royals, who's extremely explosive, and what they want to do passing the football is not going to work. Plus, they bring in Spencer Petras, who I'm not a fan of. So that was not my pick. And interestingly, in this league, I only have one regular season win play in pocket. Now, I'll qualify this with the fact that I love the coaching hire. I love where this team can eventually end up. but I don't think San Diego State has the personnel to run what Sean Lewis wants to do. They want to do the flash fast, or the Aztec fast is what they're going to call it. They're going to run a ton of tempo, and they don't have the personnel, especially at the offensive line, who's used to that. If you look at the Brady Hoke teams that San Diego State fielded, and even especially the Rocky Long teams before that, San Diego State was one of the slowest, most methodical teams in the country on offense. They ran the fewest amount of plays, and their defensive metrics, which were typically solid, were protected by seeing a limited amount of snaps. Now, if you dive into the defensive metrics for San Diego State last year, they saw those same limited amounts of snaps, and their defensive metrics were atrocious. This defense was just really bad. The entire team was bad, and even in limited snaps, they gave up a ton of yards. They gave up a ton of points. They didn't have rush success. They couldn't stop the pass. San Diego State's defense was bad last year, and now they're going to see 26 to 28 more plays based on the style of play for their offense. And I think that this defense is really going to get exposed based on the offensive style of play. I think San Diego State is going to be fun to watch. I think they're going to be in a lot of high-scoring affairs, but I do not think they're going to win a lot of football games. They've got tough non-conference games playing Oregon State. They're at California. We talked about at Central Michigan. They play Boise, UNLV, Air Force, Wazoo, at Wyoming. I just don't see a schedule that's conducive to 6-6, and I think 5-7 is a lot more likely or worse. So I did take a position on under 5.5.
All right.
And more recent developments in the quarterback room in this league. A.J. Duffy from Florida State did not win the job. It was announced that true freshman Danny O'Neal is going to be the QB1 for that team.
I like both of your guys' plays, but we didn't match on anything here, so that's nice. I'm going to take Hawaii over 5. I like Hawaii quite a bit. I think Braden Shaker is way underrated, far better than most people think he is. Second year in the system. This is a system that's not very easy to run immediately and be good at it. I think Hawaii's offense will score a lot of points this year. Now, I'm not saying the defense is good. They're going to give up a lot of points too. But I like Hawaii. They catch teams in weird spots, certainly. I think that they're pretty well coached. And I think this is a Hawaii team that is better than most people think. I think there's a good chance that Hawaii wins at least 6 games. I mean, look at Hawaii's schedule. It's not a tough schedule. Delaware State can't even get out to Hawaii now to start.
Yeah.
That's just one. That's the first sign of bad things to come for them probably in that game. But I think Hawaii over is a good play. Even at 5.5, I would play Hawaii over. Hawaii, I think, is better than most people think. And the defense doesn't have to be good for them to win more games than that. So we'll wrap up there, the Mountain West, and go to the Sun Belt.
I would say that I would have Hawaii 6-6. My only concern is their place kicker transferred, and he really battled the winds. He was good in the windy conditions. You always have to wonder about that.
Yeah, true. Yeah. And
how's the Stephen McBride situation going to adjudicate itself out? Stephen McBride, their best receiver, was suspended earlier in the summer, and he's been reinstated for football activity participation, but now there's a question on if he's eligible or not. Hawaii just released their 2-deep for their game against Delaware State, which I have a ton of thoughts on we can discuss later. And Stephen McBride's nowhere to be found, so he may not be eligible.
Yeah, good point.
That doesn't change my opinion on the position. I think Hawaii is much more improved. I could talk ad nauseum about how difficult the run and shoot is to grasp, and just the substantial difference in nature of that offensive system. Big leaps this year in year 3 for Timmy Chang.
Yeah, I think so too. And they are deep at that position. So, hopefully he's there. But all right, Sun Belt. Let's talk about the Sun Belt. I see that we're hitting new highs on viewers. I appreciate everybody who's tuned in. We all do, definitely. Follow the guys on X. Duck, are you at Step on a Duck? Is that what you're?
Yes.
Okay. And then at Ron A Sports. You can follow me at Kyle Hunter Picks. Give a thumbs up to the button below if you like the content. It certainly helps us out. More people will see it. going forward. And I'm looking forward to hopefully getting to talk with these guys some throughout the course of the season too, because this is a great discussion, a lot of fun. I'm actually kind of not really looking forward to getting off here and looking at the baseball slate for tomorrow, because I'm just excited talking about college football right now. Not that I don't like baseball, but it's a lot of fun. So let's get to the Sun Belt. Underrated. I'm going to go first here. We might match again. We'll see. I'm going to go first. I'm going to take Arkansas State. Arkansas State. The problem with Arkansas State is Butch Jones. Do I trust Butch Jones a lot? Not a lot. But if you look at the talent rankings and what they've been doing recruiting wise, they're recruiting better than the Sun Belt, a lot of these other Sun Belt teams the last few years. And also the quarterback is so good. He was excellent as a freshman. I expect another leap forward for him. They're going to be in a lot of shootouts. I'll be betting some overs in Arkansas State games this year because their defense is not good. The 5.5 number that was out there has kind of been adjusted on the win totals. I think they'll probably be good against the spread too, though, because I think Arkansas State's going to score a lot of points here in the Sun Belt this year. So they're my underrated team. Doc, what do you think?
Same. I had Arkansas State. People have a lot of memory ingrained in their mind about Butch Jones crying on the sideline in their blowout losses against Oklahoma and Memphis, but they really rallied the troops last year, and they salvaged the season, and they actually had a really decent season. And so I think based on the recruiting, based on the trend of where this program is headed, if Butch Jones can kind of just stay out of the way and let the guys play football, I actually like what they bring back a ton on offense. The high scoring affair type situation for them is really going to be it. And I've got them favored in 7 games and coin flips and a couple others. So yeah, they're not going to beat Michigan or Iowa State. I don't think they'll beat Texas State. Texas State's got a major revenge situation for the embarrassment that Arkansas State put on them last season. But I think that Arkansas State is going to be sneaky competitive in this league this year. So that's a team that I had circled for this question.
Ron?
Yeah, I won't go with Arkansas State, but apparently Richie Wolf, who graduated in 1953, is still their all-time leading running back. So it would be nice if they could run the ball just a little better. But I agree with you guys. No excuse for Butch Jones. This should be 6-6 or more. So I'm going to go with the coach that I also don't trust that much, and that's Georgia Southern. You mentioned a little bit about the Georgia Southern Boise game. Georgia Southern is going to be a hard offense to stop. Not exactly the greatest defense in the world, but we have some coaching turnover in this league as well. We have some teams in transition that are going down. I think there's a chance for Georgia Southern to take advantage of that. This is a league that still plays divisions. It's the only one that still plays in divisions. So I think they move up. They move ahead of the Georgia States of the world. They have a chance against some other teams that we might mention later on because they may be a little bit more down. Appalachian State is not absolutely unpenetrable, so they can be a challenge to any defense. So I would pick Georgia Southern as a team that could pull a couple of surprises here and then. I know they could also be upset occasionally, but they could also pull a couple of surprises. Wouldn't be upset taking them with points during the season.
All right. So let's go to overrated here. I'll let Doug start here. I don't want to feel like I'm stealing from him here on this one. So what do you have?
Well, it's a team I took a position on the regular season win under at 8.5. JMU. I think there's a substantial amount of loss that cannot be understated here. Signetti goes to Indiana, took a bunch of players with him throughout the depth chart. And I like the Bob Chesney hire from Holy Cross, but it's going to take some time. And they have a lot of production lost. Sun Belt Player of the Year, McLeod is still in the Sun Belt, but he's not playing for JMU. He's playing for another team we'll certainly talk about here shortly. And I just don't see JMU. I mean, they took FBS by storm with the seasons that they've had and the success that they've had, I think this is a year where they kind of come down to earth a little bit, and I could see them really struggling. And the market agrees with that assessment. They opened up at -12 at Charlotte. That's down to -7 flat. So people are fading JMU in week one. They're at North Carolina, which is certainly a local regional game, but I don't think they're going to win that. The conference schedule is it's marginal. App State, Marshall, Georgia Southern, Coastal. I mean, there's probably some wins on the schedule, but for them to go 9-3 or better, I just don't see them having that great of a season with all of the losses on offense and defense, for that matter. And they're a talented team, but I just see some regression from JMU. I don't see any better than 7-5 or 8-4 absolute max.
All right. I did not know that number was down to 7. That's interesting. There's been some serious movement on that line. If you took plus, I think you said 12 is what it was. If you took plus 12, I think that's a good bet. Plus 7, no longer a good bet, in my opinion. I mean, that's just you've blown through way too many key numbers. And I don't know exactly what to expect from JMU. So that was a team that I didn't want to bet anything on at the beginning of the season. I'm glad you have some insight on them because I just didn't know what to think of them. Signetti's a fantastic coach. I think they made a really good hire too, but so many guys went with Signetti, like you said, that I think that it could be difficult. So I would lean with the way that you said there. But I don't know. I mean, is that a bet on Charlotte or a bet against JMU in that first game? Maybe some of both from the sharp players there.
And I personally did take a week one position on Charlotte. I did that earlier in the summer at a line that's no longer available, so nothing really trackable. But I do have a plus 11 in pocket with Charlotte, and I feel really comfortable, obviously, with the position. Some pros for Charlotte, some cons for JMU, but I just feel as though this is kind of the year, right? JMU has had so much success and they've exceeded expectations now for 2 straight years. This is maybe the year where there's some pullback because of the attrition and the coaching changes and a new regime. And there's just so much going on to expect A+ performance week in and week out like we've seen.
All right, Ron, what do you think here?
If I were to say, take 10 or more on Charlotte, it would not be a play on Charlotte. It would be a play against James Madison, because I think Charlotte could be a train wreck. And then people will say, wait a second, James Madison's better than we think. No, I'm not going to judge week one results on that. I also have a position under 8.5 on James Madison. Obviously a great coaching staff. They've done wonderful things. They produced 45 sacks last year. The only reason I'm going to mention that is because every player who had a sack last year is gone. They have 0 sacks returning. Most of their starters are at Indiana, but some others have left. The Holy Cross coach might be just fine, but this is a tough replacement. This is tough. This isn't where you walk into CUSA and you find everybody with a low power rating. This is a Sun Belt where there are still some quality teams involved, at least on one side of the ball or another. So I would agree. It's time for regression with James Madison. We didn't see it a couple of years ago when they moved up to this level, and it looked like they didn't have a lot of returning starters. I credit their coaching staff for doing a marvelous job 2 years ago to get that done. And I will bite the bullet and lose if they get it done again.
Fair enough. For my overrated team in the Sun Belt, I'm going to take Troy. Troy, I think they lost so much. I mean, Troy lost a good coach. They lost so many key players. Massive downgrades at quarterback and running back. And if you look at Troy, you're counting on this defense really kind of pulling them along and holding it together. I think the point that Ron made there is pretty important too. The Sun Belt's actually pretty good. There are some good teams in the Sun Belt. I really like betting the Sun Belt. I like watching the Sun Belt when I can. It is the Fun Belt for sure. And I think that Troy is going to drop off pretty hard here this year. I think that, you lose the guys that they lost. They're returning 2 starters on offense and 2 on defense. And you're starting with Parker as head coach. You know, I'm not saying he's a bad head coach, but you lost a really good head coach. Now you have a really poor secondary. And there are quite a few good quarterbacks and good passing attacks in the Sun Belt that I think are going to be able to take advantage of that. So I think there's real downside risk here for Troy. I like Troy. I get betting against them ATS. And, this is a team that I think offensively will drop off quite a bit. Defensively may drop off even more. The defensive line has been fantastic. The run defense has been very good in many years in the past. They're not going to be really good this year. So I think Troy is overrated in the marketplace. Let's touch quickly on Texas State, because Texas State's a team that is getting some love futures value wise to get in the playoffs. Talk about good coaches. How about Kenny? I mean, he is one of the best in the group of 5 too. And he's not going to be at Texas State for too much longer. I think we all know that. Just going to be hard to keep somebody like that here. Money talks. And I think he's done a fantastic job with that program already. Can the defense be a little bit better? Are they getting too much hype here in the preseason, or is it deserved? Ron, let's start with you.
One of the questions I think Will asked in the chat was, do coaches matter in the group of 5? And one of the identifying factors for me is you can find out pretty early when you got a superstar and when they're going to move on, or when you have somebody who's a dud and you say, well, wait a second, this person doesn't belong coaching at whatever level we're talking about, Sunbelt or any kind of level. So we may have a superstar in the making in Kenny right now. And if that's the case, all they need is to have this defense, which didn't stop anybody last year and would be a worry, to be mediocre, because that scheme looks like it's going to work all day and night. So I think they're getting proper hype. I think we're going to find out early whether or not they can play some defense, because if they play some defense, they may be the best team in the Sun Belt. I think they're good enough to do that. We've caught a few overs of mine. And again, I don't have a lot of overs, but I did take, there was a place that had Texas State at 8 at -120. And I thought that was a fair line, because if they only win 7 games, based on the fact that I think they're as strong or better this year 2 coaching staff, then that's the way it goes. I think 8 should be the floor for this team. I'll be really curious to see whether that defense can hold its end of the bargain, because if it can, then they're worthy of the hype that we're talking about, Kyle.
I would think the defensive line is going to be a lot better. I mean, they brought in the Michigan State transfer to stop the run. I think they'll be better against the run by quite a bit. The question mark here is the secondary. I think they're improving, but they've been pretty bad. The linebackers are not great. I think Texas State's defense is going to be better. They're still going to give up a lot of points and win. Good one, Will. I like that. The fact that Texas State lost that game like they did to Arkansas State last year, like you brought up earlier there, Doug. I think this is a team that's certainly capable of losing a game by a decent amount because of giving up so many points. But I think you could make the argument that they are probably even better at quarterback as far as depth. I think McLeod's really good. And they have 2 or 3 guys behind him that they feel really good about. I think Texas State's very good shape at quarterback. Mahdi's fantastic. I mean, that guy is a lot of fun to watch. Like, he breaks everything. He's just the home run hitter. So I think Texas State does deserve the love. I'm curious what you think about this one, Doug.
Well, to add to the running back room, Mahdi is exceptional talent, and they have a 1-2 punch now. They bring in Deion Hankins from UTEP, who's a bruising running back who did really well in that system. Even though UTEP was a bad football team, he was an exceptional running back. So it's a true 1-2 punch of thunder and lightning, which will just add to the offensive prowess. When we talk about Texas State, and if their defensive line is elevated to possibly top defensive line in the Sun Belt, if we go through the schedule and we look at the teams that they're going to play, are these teams capable of exploiting the weak pass defense? So Lamar, certainly not. UTSA, massive losses with UTSA. They're still going to be very good, but are they going to throw the ball all over the field on Texas State? I'm not sure. I don't think Arizona State will be able to throw the ball on them. Sam Houston didn't have an exceedingly strong passing game. Troy takes a big step back on offense and has a lot of things to work out. Old Dominion can't throw the ball. ULM could be like every year ULM plays a game where it's like they're 28-point underdogs and they're up 2 with a minute to go and blow it, but still easily cover the number. Maybe that's a spot where ULM can cover, but Southern Miss, Georgia State, none of these teams have exceptional passing offenses. And so I think that maybe while the secondary is not as good as you'd like to see from an elite team, it's not going to get exposed as maybe some other leagues would be able to expose that. Like if you have a bad secondary in the Big 12, you're not going to win. Maybe in this league, it's not going to be as magnified. And I mean, they're going to outscore so many of these teams. There's a couple spots where they really are going to have to bow up and at least be mediocre on defense. But the weakness might not be as exposed as it could based on the teams that they play in their schedule.
Makes sense. I mean, you know, other than Arkansas State, a team that obviously can throw it, and they don't play Georgia Southern, so that helps as well. I think Texas State in line for special things this year. Going to have some really high totals on their games. I'm going to want to bet overs, and they're going to have me priced out on some of these. I know for sure. Let's get to favorite win total in this conference. Ron, you go first here. What do you think?
I only have 9 win totals in this conference, so I apologize for not having too many. Yeah, I like this conference a lot, but the one I'm going to give out is the one you've already talked about, because it may be the first time in my memory that I may have actually contributed to moving a line. Because Troy was 7.5, and every place that was 7.5 was hit by me or somebody through me, because I just thought that line should never have been 7.5. So we'll go with that one. I would be surprised if there was not regression from Troy. Could they make a bowl? Fine. Let them make a bowl at 6-6. We're fine.
Doc, what do you like here?
I took a position earlier in the summer, and we talked about it on Twitter, Kyle, Old Dominion under, and I took 5. 5 may or may not be available, but I still like 4.5 with Old Dominion. Old Dominion is just a team that seems to be stuck in the mud, and they haven't really elevated their play since they have been in the Sun Belt. They found a way somehow last year to scratch across 6 wins, but they could have easily lost almost every one of those games. I mean, they didn't have a lot of really solid performances, and I am not sold on what they bring back. When I look at the teams that they have a really tough schedule, all things considered. They are likely go 0-4 in the non-conference. South Carolina, East Carolina, Va Tech, and at Bowling Green. I don't have them winning any of those games. At Coastal and at Georgia State are roadies. Maybe they split, so you're starting 1-5. They're not going to beat Texas State, in my opinion. They're not going to win at App State. I would be really surprised in the bottom half of the schedule towards the back end, right? James Madison, Marshall, and Arkansas State, they're at least a touchdown worse than every one of those teams. And so I just don't see how they're going to win 6 games to cause my under 5 to lose. But even at 4.5, I think is still a good position. I just don't see 4 wins on this slate. I see 3 wins on this slate, so I even see room for this win total to run. And really strong position for me on Old Dominion. I don't like what they have, what they bring to the table, and I just don't see a schedule that's conducive to racking up a lot of wins under on Old Dominion.
Yeah, I mean, I bet both of the ones that Ron and Doug said here. So I'm going to go with a different one, even though I actually like those better than the one that I'm going to say. But I want to give people a different one on this one. I'm going to take Marshall under 6. Marshall, so I feel like 6 is it could push. It may push. That's fine. But I don't like the way this program, like they don't even know who the quarterback's going to be. They've had this. Who's it going to be at quarterback? But they're changing to an air raid offense. I don't love that. I think that, when you bring in as many transfers as they did this year too, and you've been there for as long as you have for Huff, I think it's kind of a sign for concern. I don't think Marshall's the same team they were. They used to win solely because of their defense. It was so good. I think the defense is still good. It's not as good as it used to be. And now they're playing air raid, and they're going to have to be facing a lot more plays from the other side because of the up tempo. So Marshall under is the one that I will take here for this one, but I like both of the guys' plays on that one as well. All right, so we got through the conferences. Let's rapid fire here the rest of this because we need to wrap up. I will say I'm impressed that we have the most listeners and viewers that we've had all the time here at the end. It's a good sign. People like what we're doing. We're over 500 viewers here, most of them on X. I appreciate you guys who are watching. Definitely. We've been talking for quite a while. We're passionate about this stuff, and I think everybody can tell it who's watching. So we wanted to have just a brief segment here where, okay, you always have like a team or two that you wonder about, like you're like, I don't know what to do with this team. This team is just, throw them out right away. I don't know. So let's ask maybe just one or two teams for each of us to pick, to try to pick each other's brains. Let's stick with group of 5 here, unless you really want to talk about one that's a bigger name team. But Ron, do you want to start us off here? Do you got a team or two?
Okay. I had 2, but one's group of 5, but and one's partially group of 5. A lot of people asked me about Purdue, which I had no opinion on. But again, a team we didn't talk about because they're an independent is Connecticut. And I want to get your take on this one. I pulled the trigger on this offshore book. I don't think I did it in Vegas. I took UConn to have more wins than Purdue. Thoughts?
Okay, so I'll start here because I was wrong about UConn last year. I had a really good season on win totals last year, but UConn over was one of my bad plays like that. I don't know what I did there, but they've gotten such poor quarterback play. You have to think that it can't get much worse. I think they have a decent offensive line, and Mora is a pretty good coach for that level. I lean toward that. I don't have a strong opinion on Purdue, to be honest, Ron. That's one of my wait and see teams as well. So I would lean toward UConn, and I did put in my notes. I would probably want to bet UConn rather than bet against them, but I was burned last year. So, Doc, I want to know what you think about this one. What do you think, UConn, Purdue? What do you think?
UConn is. It was so strange to see the regression. They were 1-11 in 21, and then they make a bowl game in 22 and played pretty competitively in that 2022 bowl game against Marshall. And then last year, they opened the season with a really competitive loss hosting NC State. And then it just kind of fell apart, right? And they were so unspirited on defense, and they just looked so lost. I remember watching that Duke game, and they just could not solve the Duke mystery. And they seemed to quit at the end of the year, especially playing JMU and Tennessee. It just seemed like they just threw in the towel. And it was really unique effort that was given from a Jim Mora coach team, because even if the team is bad, usually Jim Mora coach teams still play spirited football. And so I really hope that UConn can get back to that. I actually took a position on UConn in their first game of the season at Maryland, and I took it earlier in the summer. They were plus 22.5. And so I did play UConn in that week 1 game, still hovering around 21 or 21.5, which I think is a play, anything over 3 touchdowns. But the schedule lines up okay for Connecticut this season when hosting Merrimack. They're at Duke, who's way down. I think Duke is a fade team. I faded their regular season win, and Duke is way down. So I wouldn't consider that necessarily unwinnable. Hosting FAU, hosting Buffalo, hosting Temple, hosting Wake. I mean, there's a lot of games at home for them. And then the season concludes at UMass. Yeah, I don't see a situation where they couldn't win 5 or 6 games for sure with the slate. I think that they have to get better quarterback play, and they have a senior quarterback who's been in the system for quite some time. So there's really no excuse for him to not grasp what they're wanting to do and make better decisions and kind of own some of those key clutch late game situations, which I'd like to see from UConn this year. offensive line play, I mean, it's always a key, but offensive and defensive line play will be key. And I just want to see how spirited this team plays, because last year at times they kind of lost that sort of fire to really compete. And I was really surprised from a Jim Mora coached UConn team that we didn't see that from, to all of a sudden seeing them be really, really uninspiring.
I think that's fair. I'm going to throw out one for you guys. What am I supposed to? And Duck, you said that you were talking in depth about Mountain West last night. All right, so San Jose State. What am I supposed to think of San Jose State? I mean, this is just a really interesting spot where you bring a completely different situation. I think Brennan was a good coach. I think they have a new good head coach too. I mean, you bring this, I think they're calling it spread and shred or something. And how's that going to look in the Mountain West right away? I mean, Doc, you start. What do you think of San Jose State right from the beginning?
So one of my 17 win totals we didn't get to discuss, but I took a position on under 4.5. People will look at Navy Ken and think, are they going to run the triple option here? And obviously the solid answer is no. They're going to run the spread and shred. They're going to run air raid principles and a little bit of run and shoot, and they're going to be a little bit higher tempo offense this year, similar to what we saw from them last year. They don't really have the personnel that they had last year, though. Chevin Cordero is really going to be hard to replace. I'm not a fan of either Emmett Brown or Walter Eget. And then they had Jay Butterfield, who transferred in the summer. He was their backup last year, and he transferred out. So I'm not sold on exactly what the quarterback play is going to be this year. All the pass catchers are gone with the exception of Nick Nash, who is probably their best wide receiver, but they lose a lot of explosiveness. And I think that the offensive line is going to take time to gel with this particular system. They lose quite a bit on defense. And when I'm looking at a regular season win play or any sort of prognostication for how a team is going to be, I really dive into the weeds with the schedule. And this schedule is not favorable, right? They're at Air Force, they're at Wazoo, they're at Colorado State. They also are at Fresno State. They're at Oregon State. They play Boise. They play UNLV, and they play Stanford. So they play all of the top teams in the Mountain West, plus 3. I guess none of them are Pac-12 teams anymore, but plus Wazoo and Oregon State and Stanford. And I just don't see a lot of assured wins. I see Kennesaw State on the merits being an assured win, and I see Nevada being an assured win. But even that first game of the season with Sac State's going to be a fight. I mean, Sac State will bring it against a depleted San Jose State defense. I'm not sold that San Jose is going to be really good this year. I think San Jose is a team that it's going to take a little bit of time for Ken Niumatalolo to build that culture. I think he's going to recruit very well out of California. He's a West Coast guy. People think of Ken and they think of Navy for 16 years and he's just an East Coast guy, but no, most of his coaching was done in Hawaii and on the West Coast. So he'll recruit California well, he'll recruit Hawaii well, he'll recruit the Polynesian communities well, and I think that long term it'll be a good thing for him. This year I think we'll take some licks.
All right, Ron, starting the season, San Jose State, a team you're neutral on, you want to fade back. What do you think?
First of all, world-class props for that pronunciation of the coach. I would never try that. This is a team I was disappointed I didn't see a 5 on. We really see the market be a little bit sharper than we have. You know, a team that looked so good last year. Yeah, you mark them down because the coaching change and attrition, but they really started to mark them in a price. And I thought so long and hard about what I wanted to do with this. But this is potentially a scheme and culture change. This was literally the 46th and last play that I made, and it's one of my very smallest plays, but I did go under 4.5.
All right. Duck, do you have any teams that you want to throw out?
Yeah, it's a team that's near and dear to my heart as a gambler. And it's so oftentimes people will say, who's your favorite college football team? Who are you a real fan of? And at this point in time in my life and in my gambling career, my favorite team is whoever I bet on, right? I like 60 different teams at any one time. Not that I have 60 plays at any one time, but I can find a reason to like any team. And one of the teams that I have found situationally to back, and it's gone well, and at times I've been burned, but there's a massive overhaul both in personnel, in schemes, in coaching. But I'd be interested for you fellows to kind of throw out some thoughts on UTEP.
Oh man, that's a tough one.
Glad you
I'm
mentioned
really
that one.
conflicted on UTEP as well. We're very conflicted on UTEP, so I'd love to hear what you guys think.
Okay. I tried so hard to think about going over on this team because I believe in this 3-word phrase that was designed for Urban Meyer and carried forward by Lovie Smith: addition by subtraction. And that head coach that was there was on my bottom 5 list for, I think, 6 or 7 seasons at 2 of his stops. I think you could put a puppet in the position of that head coach and they would be better. Anything I could to convince myself that I would go over on that team, but I couldn't do it. I just couldn't pull the trigger. But I will try to back them during the season in plays where I think they're undervalued, because I think they have, I think it couldn't get worse from a coaching standpoint. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, on this one, I'm looking at my notes here. I really want to wait and see and not bet on something here early in the season, but the coach upgrade is significant. So I want to bet on them later in the season. I just don't know if it's going to, immediately work, but you're coming into a league where, we already talked about it. This is a weak league. If you can make some upgrades, it wouldn't be shocking if something shows up in one season here as compared to some of the other leagues. So I would tend to think that they're a team I'd want to back. All 5 starters are gone from the offensive line, but is that a bad thing? I mean, sometimes, we don't know if it's a bad thing or a good thing some of these times, because they say, you'll look in the magazine and it'll say, well, everybody's gone from here, which is tough. But I mean, they were not good. So if they weren't good, then it's possible that they'll be good. It's hard when it's the offensive line because it's everybody new. But they had really poor quarterback play last year. I think the running backs are pretty good, and Walden kind of has a background of having teams that can run the football pretty well. So I think UTEP is a team I want to bet, but don't think I want to do it early in the season. So I kind of want to wait back, make sure that assumption is correct, that UTEP could be on the up here. But for me, that's kind of the farthest I could go with it. I can't bet anything preseason on UTEP. All right. So we had a couple questions I want to hit on too, but let's also, I can't believe it's after midnight here, guys. We have been hitting it here big time, but let's go real quick. What's a playoff team? Yes or no? Playoff team. I'll start. I'm hoping we won't match on this one, but I'm going to take Penn State. Yes, at -140. Sorry, man, if we matched on that one. Penn State is like the perfect team for this 12-team playoff because they've not quite been able to get over those other best teams, but they're very good. And I think you add Kotelnicki to that and another year for Aller, Penn State should make the playoff. This line was it was like +110 several months ago. So -140, not nearly as good as you could have done in the past, but I still think -140 is good. And I find it hard to find a ton of value on a lot of these yes or no playoff ones. So that was my favorite, was Penn State. Yes. Ron, what do you think? Do you have any you like here on this?
Yeah, I considered that one. One caveat, I think with the team I'm picking, there's one schedule placement that I cannot stand for this particular team. But it is the SEC, and you could possibly get in even at 9-3 in the SEC because of strength of schedule and strength of opponents. And I have Mississippi as the team. I think they clearly have the most talented team that Lane Kiffin has ever had. I don't like the placement of the LSU game at all. And if they lose the Georgia game, they have to run, they might have to run the table they would to get to 10-2, and 9-3. They're at the mercy of the committee and stuff like that. But I do think Ole Miss has clear playoff talent if they can navigate the schedule.
I think so as well. And the SEC is going to get some teams in at 9-3 as they go through this playoff. Absolutely. Doc, what do you think here?
2 points I'll make on Penn State. So James Franklin during his tenure, 3-17 against Michigan and Ohio State, and he's always kind of been like the third wheel, right? And three's company, and it's just he's been the odd man out for so long. But I think with the expanded playoff, that they will benefit from that. Another point that I'll make, because I've seen fair market value on that play anywhere from 160 to minus 160 to minus 170. So if you're finding a 140, there's so much value in futures and also week to week, right? The quickest and easiest way that you can improve your profitability as a sports bettor and turn this from something that's just another thing to do, like working out or working on your car in the garage, just another hobby. If you're trying to move the needle towards making this a profitable venture, get an odds comparison tool, shop around, have 4 or 5 different outs so you can get yourself in a better position. In the course of one bet, it's not going to make a difference. But if you make 200 or 300 bets over the course of a season with your weekly plays, your derivatives, your futures, your win totals, that's going to add up to over 200 or 300 plays. That could be a difference of 12 or 13 wins at the end of the year in EV. And that could take you from, winning 4 or 5, being plus 4 or 5 units to plus 18 or 20 units. It's a big deal. So definitely shop around and get yourself in the best position to be successful. I want to, second thing I'll say about teams to make the playoff, you had mentioned that you made a play on Boise State to win the Mountain West, and then also had alluded to the fact that you think that Boise State is likely the cream of the crop in the Mountain West and they're head and shoulders above everybody else. There's a plus 490 out there for them to make the playoff. And so rather than them winning the league, which is anywhere from minus 110 to plus 110 or plus 120, maybe snatch a plus 490 to make the playoff, because if they go 11-1 and I don't care what the other teams do, if they go 11-1 and they lose by 14 against Boise State, or excuse me, against Oregon, they're going to be in the playoff.
Yeah,
they're going to be the representative. Liberty, it doesn't matter what Liberty does. If Boise State plays Oregon to 14 and Liberty played them to 48, it's not going to matter. The committee will weigh that.
Agree. Yeah, I think that's a good point. That's something I'm going to think about a little bit more, because 490 seems like a pretty good price. Yeah, I think Boise in a pretty good spot. They play a pretty decent schedule compared to some of those other teams we talk about. I mean, that strength of schedule is a lot better than, think about Liberty's schedule comparatively. So yeah, I think that's a good thought. All right,
do we have time for one more? Just super quick, 30-second elevator speech. And this is a P5 team, and I'm a G5 guy and an FCS guy, but UCLA. I mean, it's not going to go well for them this year, is it?
No.
I hope not.
Yeah.
No, I have an under 5.5. And just watch Big Ten Media Days. Deshaun Foster looked like he had massive stage fright. It was painful to watch.
Yeah. We're all in agreement on that one. So hopefully that one cashes. I have to say,
I was going to make just one quick comment if I could. I think you guys alluded to a little bit about how the committee might feel about Liberty and what they saw and so on. I think the committee did Nick Saban a big favor last year with Alabama, and there may have been some behind the scenes stuff going on and stuff like that. Considering the sanctions on Michigan and the new coach at Alabama, if ties matter, I think those teams will not get the benefit of the doubt come playoffs this year. That's just a personal opinion.
Interesting. I could see Michigan not getting the benefit of the doubt. I don't know about Alabama. I don't know if I agree with that.
Alabama and Mississippi don't play, and it would be really interesting if they ended up with the same record.
Yeah, that would be interesting. We'll see. That wouldn't be shocking. Far stranger things have happened than that. I want to echo, too, what Doug said a minute ago, and I know Ron thinks the same way. Shopping around is vitally important. I think it's probably the most common mistake I see in many bettors is, well, I have this book and the line is, take money line betting. I hear, well, the money line favorite's minus 125 on my book and you got minus 110, but it only matters if you lose. So who cares? I'm taking minus 125. It's a terrible way of thinking. Over the long term, those 15 cents are going to matter a ton. Because this is a grind, you're going to have plenty of losses. And in this, In football, we know how many of these lines come down to a point or half a point. And whether it be season win totals or individual game ones, getting the best of the number, the absolute best that you can, is vitally important. So that's also a reason I like to bet on the lines fairly early in the week rather than waiting till the very end of the week. I think it's better time to try to enter. Obviously, there's sometimes you got to wait for weather or injuries or something like that, but I think it's better to be early than late. Two questions really quick, and then we're going to wrap it up. I saw, I believe it was Fox, ask about the rule changes. Like if we think anything about the rule changes, the effects, and the big rule change is the 2-minute warning. I think probably like somewhere between 1 and 1.5 point difference on totals for the 2-minute warning is fair. The other one is, what do you guys think about the in-helmet communications? I mean, I've heard people think that could make a decent difference this year. I don't know, just a quick couple sentence thought on any of the rule changes here.
For me, no, it's not entering into my decision making at the present time. Neither one.
Yeah, very, very, very little. It would not be a factor that I would use as part of my handicapping. And I will say, from an in-game situation, from the helmet communication, when you're on a football team, speaking football vernacular is a different language anyway, and oftentimes it's being used by hand signals on the sideline. So people can say things to each other by using hand signals and other communication. And when you're in loud environments, you're not going to be able to hear your helmet anyway. So I think it could, I mean, maybe improve communication a little bit, or maybe it has very little impact, but it has no bearing whatsoever on what I'm doing from an investment perspective week to week.
So the last question, and then we're going to wrap it here. T-Bone on X asked, lines are posted Sunday during the season. Talk us through the process of picking games, which you like to pick during the week. Is it good to bet early or late? I did touch on this already. I definitely like to bet early. I kind of think that if you bet early, it's you versus the odds maker, and that's it. You don't have to bet against other groups and, this person jumps it. And, we see the tempo change from this team. I bet a lot of totals. You guys know that. I'm a big totals guy. For me, what I like to look at early in the seasons, I like to look at teams that have had a lot of changes. If you have a coaching change, an offensive coordinator that's different, those are the teams I want to bet something on early in the season, because it's harder for the odds makers to know what kind of number to put on their game. If it's Iowa, everybody knows what Iowa is. They've been the same for so many years. I mean, why would you want to try to highlight Iowa as the team, to look at early in the season? I think big changes. The NIL makes it wild, as you guys know. It's really hard to keep track of everything, but big changes in players are very common now. When we see the offensive coordinator changes, the scheme changes, that's something I like to look for early in the season. The process of which games you like to pick. I mean, I like to try to go through and exclude some games right away. Say, this is really close to what I made the line. This is one that I have question marks about both teams. I don't even care what the Lions put out on this one. I know I'm not going to want to bet it. That's how I kind of make the process quicker, but I like to bet earlier in the week. Ron, you next. Any kind of quick thoughts on your process for something like this?
Yeah, I'm going to make it quick. I think this deserves a larger conversation. I don't think we have the time for that now. I think there are reasons to bet early, especially if you have conviction in your power ratings and you see something that's really off. I think the minute you have a comparison, when you have two books that come out at the same time and they're different, you might be forced to make a choice early, because these services, they come out with their plays and they move lines at very weird times now, and you have to be aware of that kind of stuff. So you have to jump the gun. And sometimes I have preconceived ideas about which way a line will move, and if I'm satisfied with the line, I'll do it. But there are so many other reasons to wait. I'd say in general, just wrapping it up real quickly, is I might have 25 to 30% of my plays made by Monday morning, and 50% of my plays made by Tuesday. But there are some lines and numbers I'm waiting on for a variety of reasons that haven't hit the point yet, or I'm waiting for information. So I don't think there's one set time to bet, but you do miss some things if you're not ahead of the game with some stuff.
Duck, what do you think about this one?
I mean, I could talk until the coffee runs out on
Yeah.
this. I've got varying different approaches throughout different points of the season, but a couple things that I'll make real quick. So I've done a lot of preparation in the off season for weeks 1 and 2. So when I have in theory what I want to see from a particular team in a line, especially FBS versus FCS, if I see the line I want, I'm going to fire away because I have conviction in my research. I have conviction in my power ratings. But the other thing I do all summer is I'm going through scheduling spots, and I've got my board right here, and I'm writing down ahead of time through the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season. Okay, if this team does this in week 4, I know I'm going to fade them in week 5 against this particular team, or there might be a series rivalry, or there might be an overlooked spot. And so I've got a lot of different things that I have selected and circled in red ink that I'm going to really keep an eye on. And if I see the number that I want, I'm going to fire away at it. But then the other thing is I routinely spend my Saturday evenings after the Hawaii game updating my metrics and my numbers. And I've kind of formulated what I think a line for a particular game could or should be, or if there's something that I want to try to catch. So that way I'm ready to fire away on the openers, and I'm not just firing blindly, but I have something in mind that I want to see. And I'll fire away 5 minutes after a line is put out if I see the number that I want. I also am willing to hold off to try to wait to see if I'm going to get a particular number that I want. It's really, really critical in totals. There are so many key numbers in totals, right? 48, 49, 52, 55, 56, 59, 62. There's so many key numbers, especially in the college leagues. And so waiting to get the number that I really want before making a play is critical. And then having a plan on Saturday night after all the games have concluded for the following week, and then just carrying out the plan if the number allows you to carry out the plan, really allows you to stay a step ahead. Be thinking about the following week or even the week after that during the current week, so you're not just chasing and trying to cover up with duct tape the water in the pipe that's leaking, and you're trying to make all these different moves without a real calculated plan. I think if you can try to stay a week or two ahead and kind of have an idea of what you want to see, visualize out with the lines, and then you can execute your plan, you'll be in a much better position.
I think those are good answers, and like you guys said, we could spend hours on this, but that's the quick version, and I like that. So, thank you guys for the questions. Thank you for everybody who's tuned in. Seeing over 600. Michael, you've been here throughout the whole time. Shout out, we appreciate that. Will, Fox, a lot of you guys have been chatting as well over there. I appreciate that, and a lot of people have been watching here on X. Ron, Duck, man, I really appreciate you guys. You guys have taken a lot of time here tonight. Appreciate you coming on here. Everybody who's watched this can tell that you guys know what you're talking about. Thanks for joining me here. Ron, you start. Why don't you let the people know where they can find your work throughout the course of the season?
Well, hopefully from time to time, we'll all get together, or you, Kyle and I will get together, because brainstorming is great. Yes, we agreed on a lot of stuff now, but we'll have questions for each other during the week about certain lines and stuff. That'll be a lot different. And before I say where we can find me, definitely find Duck out there too. This is my first meeting with him. And I think the handicapping world is in good hands with the thought process that you've gone through with the board and so on. I see a younger version of myself there, so maybe I can be reincarnated. So appreciate the fact that I met you. Starting next Tuesday, Chris and I will have our kind of phone call open to the public, where we brainstorm with each other and we bring up topics at the last minute. Las Vegas, Chris and I, we've been known to make an impromptu wager on something because we're constantly challenging each other and testing each other. Most of our talk will be on the NFL. And then my good friend from way back, Ted Sobel, who's done a lot of announcing and a lot of stuff out in the LA area, was at Rams camp, in fact, this past week. He's got some good nuggets about the kickoff rules and stuff. Chris, Ted, and I will be back with a weekly Thursday show this week instead of Friday. We'll be doing, not this week, but weekly on Thursdays. And we'll be doing an NFL and college. And then I go on with the East Coast guys, Jeff Dawson. That's where you can find me talking a little bit more about college football. Articles on Wager Talk. You can find me saying weird but nice things on Twitter. So I try to be very nice to people.
Ron's a great guy, also a great handicapper. Definitely thank you for coming on here today. And Duck, why don't you let the people know where they can find your work? I know you're going to be out there here more throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, so podcast repertoire to include the Jake Circus podcast, The First Read, Lean Toss-Up Sports, and others. Very active in the gambling forums, so covers.com, Capping the Game, the RX forum, all the major gambling forums. I'll be freelance writing for the Action Network, so you can go to the Action Network. Usually people just access the app. It's a really popular app, and you can find my work there. And yeah, that's pretty much where it'll be. And then I'll be posting a lot of thoughts and having some great discussion on Twitter. And so a lot of places to get a hold of me if people are interested. And if I'm not doing college football, which I do 250 days a year, it's the only thing I specialize in. Outside of that, I'll be on the beach.
That's a great place to be too. That's for sure. All right. So guys, thank you for your time. I appreciate everybody who's tuned in. You can find my work at huntersportspicks.com. If you ever have any questions, you can reach out to me at Kyle Hunter Picks on Twitter, Kyle@huntersportspicks.com, my email. And guys, we appreciate your time that you've spent with us here tonight. If you're watching this back later, give the guys a follow there on X. Both of them are a great follow. It's going to be a fun college football season. I hope we can have the guys back and have some chats throughout the course of the season. And best of luck to everybody throughout the course of the season, and we'll follow up with you again sometime soon. Thanks, everybody.